Hello guys, welcome to Fiction Quest. So in this video, we will see, what if Naruto became a rock star and his harem was made up of his biggest fans from every village? If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1. The Sound of the Fox. The air was a living thing. It thrummed with the collective heartbeat of 200,000 souls packed into the great valley just beyond Konoha's gates, a space carved out years ago for the Chunin exams and now repurposed for something far grander, far louder. The sky was a deep, bruised purple, the first stars just beginning to prick the darkening canvas. On the horizon, the stoic faces of the Hokage monument watched over the proceedings, silent stone sentinels observing a new kind of power being wielded in their village. This wasn't the chakra of war, nor the quiet hum of a village at peace. This was something else entirely. It was a raw, kinetic energy, a tidal wave of anticipation that rolled from the heaving mass of the crowd and crashed against the colossal stage. The stage itself was a marvel of shinobi engineering. Built of chakra-conductive wood and steel, it pulsed with a faint, inner light, its support towers looking like siege weapons aimed at the heavens. Giant, crystalline amplifiers, powered by lightning-style seals, hummed with contained power. But all of it, the lights, the scale, the sheer spectacle, was just the prelude. The crowd knew it. They weren't here for the stagecraft. They were here for him. From her vantage point on a small rise near the back, Hinata Hyuga could see it all. Not just with her eyes, but with her Byakugan. To the naked eye, it was a sea of people. Shinobi from every nation, civilians who had traveled for weeks, faces painted with whisker marks, hands clutching glow sticks sealed with tiny light jutsus. But through her dojutsu, the valley was a swirling nebula of chakra. Each person was a small, flickering flame of blue, and the combined anxiety and excitement made the air shimmer, a chaotic storm of spiritual energy. It was beautiful, but it was messy, discordant. 1,000 different songs playing at once. Then, the stage lights died. A single, visceral roar erupted from the crowd, a sound so immense it felt like the earth itself was shouting. The chaotic storm of chakra flared, a blinding flash of emotion. For a moment, there was only darkness and the sound of that unified voice. A single spotlight cut through the black, painting a lone figure in its center. He wore no elaborate costume, just simple black cargo pants, worn shinobi sandals, and a tight orange shirt that hugged a frame honed by a life of relentless motion. His hair was a spiky shock of impossible gold, and slung over his shoulder was not a ninja tool pouch, but a 6-stringed guitar that looked like it had been carved from volcanic rock and moonlight. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. He just raised a hand. Silence. 200,000 people, and the only sound was the whisper of the wind through the valley. It was a testament to a command that no cage could boast. He held them all in the palm of his hand. Naruto Uzumaki, known to the world as Kyuubi, brought his hand down, and struck a single chord. It wasn't just a sound. It was a shockwave. Hinata's Byakugan saw it happen. From Naruto, a torrent of the most potent, most vibrant chakra she had ever witnessed erupted. It was the color of the sun, a ferocious, untamed gold. But it was not the chaotic energy of the beast he was named for. This was controlled, refined, shaped by his will. It poured into the guitar, down his arms, and exploded outwards through the amplifiers not as sound, but as a physical wave of organized energy. The wave slammed into the crowd. Hinata braced herself, but it didn't hurt. It was the opposite of a blow. It was a caress, a key turning a lock she didn't know was there. Through her Byakugan, the chaotic nebula of individual chakra signatures suddenly aligned. The messy, discordant blues and greens and reds of the crowd were instantly washed over by that golden wave, and where it passed, it left order. The thousands of flickering flames didn't extinguish. They began to pulse in unison, their light purifying, their rhythm finding a common beat. The entire valley became a single, harmonious ocean of light, all of it resonating with the golden sun that was Naruto on that stage. He began to play. The music was a driving, thunderous rhythm, a melody that spoke of struggle and defiance. It was rock, a genre many of the older generation dismissed as noise, but in his hands, it was a weapon of creation. His fingers danced across the fretboard. each note a precise application of chakra. He wasn't just playing music, he was weaving a jutsu on an unprecedented scale. His voice, when it came, was raw and powerful, scraping with emotion. They built the walls to keep us down. He roared, the lyrics amplified into the soul of every listener. They drew the lines in every town. He stomped his foot, and a visible pulse of chakra rippled through the ground. An old shinobi from the stone, a veteran of the Third War with a leg that had never quite healed, felt the deep, throbbing ache that had been his companion for 30 years simply vanish. He stared down at his limb, stunned, the phantom pain replaced by a warm, soothing hum. Screamed in a voice that wasn't mine. Naruto sang, his voice rising in pitch, filled with a remembered agony that was now a source of strength. Just another broken sign. A young kunoichi from the mist, her face scarred from the brutal academy of the bloodline purges, felt the tight knot of hatred in her chest loosen. The faces of the men who had tormented her, images that haunted her waking moments, began to fade, not erased, but losing their power, replaced by the overwhelming sense of connection she felt to the thousands around her, to the man on the stage who sang of a pain she understood. This was the secret to his power. This was why he was more than a musician. He didn't just perform for his audience, he connected with them, sharing his own chakra and, in doing so, reminding their bodies and spirits how to heal, how to hope. He wasn't implanting emotions, he was unlocking the ones they already had, buried under years of pain, war, and mistrust. Hinata watched, mesmerized. Her clan spoke of the gentle fist as the pinnacle of chakra control, a way to disrupt and destroy. What Naruto was doing was a form of gentle fist for the soul. He wasn't attacking pressure points, he was resonating with them, tuning the discordant strings of a person's spirit. The tapestry she saw was breathtaking. Golden threads of Naruto's chakra wove through the entire crowd, mending frayed edges, strengthening weak points, and weaving everyone together into a single, magnificent whole. The song built to a crescendo, a furious, triumphant explosion of sound and light. Naruto threw his head back, and the image of the nine-tailed fox, not as a monster but as a blazing, stylized emblem, appeared in a flare of chakra behind him. It was his sigil, the mark of his past, a monster he had not slain but tamed, its power now the engine for his art. This is our anthem. Can you hear the sound? He screamed, the final chord hanging in the air like a physical presence. The beat of the outcast, shaking the ground. I am the echo, I am the rage, and I will never be locked in a cage. The final note faded, but the energy remained. The crowd was a single entity now, their chakra aligned, their spirits soaring. For a few precious moments, there was no leaf, no sand, no stone, mist, or cloud. There was only the unity festival. There was only the shared heartbeat of those who had been touched by the sound of the fox. The roar that followed the silence was not just applause. It was catharsis. It was gratitude. It was love. Naruto stood, breathing heavily, sweat plastering his golden hair to his forehead. He leaned into the microphone, a wide, genuine grin splitting his face. The grin of a boy who had once been desperate for any kind of acknowledgement and now commanded the absolute adoration of a nation's worth of people. You feelin' good tonight, Konoha? The response shook the very foundations of the valley. He laughed, a bright, honest sound that carried with it no ego, only shared joy. He was one of them, and they were all him. For tonight, at least, they were all family. Hinata lowered her gaze, deactivating her Byakugan. The ghost of the golden tapestry still burned into her vision. She felt a tear slip down her cheek, not of sadness, but of overwhelming, gut-wrenching awe. He had taken the world's hatred, its fear, and its loneliness, and he had transformed it all into a song. A song that was healing the world, one concert at a time. The last of the roadies had packed up the final amplifier. The colossal stage was now dark and silent, a sleeping giant under the moonlight. Backstage was a controlled chaos of technicians, security personnel, and the occasional sycophant trying to talk their way past the guards. In the center of the storm was a small, quiet eye. Naruto sat on a simple wooden crate, a towel draped over his neck, guzzling water from a canteen. The explosive, god-like aura from the stage was gone, replaced by a quiet, humming exhaustion. He looked younger now, the lines of concentration erased from his face, leaving G behind the faint whisker marks that were as much a part of his identity as his golden hair. You're going to burn yourself out, a lazy voice drawled from the shadows. Shikamaru Nara emerged, a clipboard tucked under his arm and a look of profound weariness on his face. As Naruto's manager, strategist, and lifelong friend, he was one of the few people who saw the man behind the myth. It's a good burn, Naruto replied, his voice a little hoarse. He set the canteen down with a sigh. Did you see them, Shika? Did you feel that? There were shinobi from Iwa and Kumo in the front row, arms around each other. You can't put a price on that. I can. The price is your chakra reserves, Shikamaru countered, though there was no heat in his words. He ticked off points on his clipboard. Food and lodging for the crew. Travel permits for the next leg of the tour, paying off the damages from that enthusiastic fan who tried to Earth-style his way backstage. It's all a drag. And the biggest variable is you. You pushed out more chakra tonight than you did during the entire Kiri festival. Kiri needed calm. Konoha needed a release, Naruto said, staring out at the empty valley. They needed to scream and shout and remember what it feels like to be alive, together. Shikamaru sighed, the sound of a man who had long ago given up arguing. Troublesome. Just try to stick to the set list next time. That last number, the Rage Anthem, that wasn't on the docket. Spontaneous chakra bursts on that scale give the Sensor Corps a collective heart attack. Naruto just grinned. The crowd asked for an encore. Before Shikamaru could formulate another complaint, a Konoha Jonin appeared at the edge of the backstage area, looking hesitant but determined. Uzumaki-sama. Naruto waved him over. Just Naruto's fine. The Jonin nodded, a little star-struck. Naruto-sama. Hokage-sama requests your presence. It's urgent. Shikamaru's lazy demeanor sharpened instantly. Urgent. The festival just ended. What could be so urgent it can't wait until morning? I am not at liberty to say, the Jonin said stiffly. Only that she was insistent. Naruto shared a look with Shikamaru. It was rare for Tsunade to summon him so formally. Especially right after a major event. He pushed himself off the crate, his body protesting with a groan. The post-performance chakra drain was beginning to set in. All right, lead the way. Don't agree so quickly, Shikamaru muttered, falling into step beside him. It's probably just another political dinner. The daimyo's nephew is a huge fan, you know. Wants you to sign his forehead protector. What a drag, but Naruto could feel it. A subtle shift in the air, a cold note under the warm night. The euphoria of the concert was fading, and the reality of the world was creeping back in. Something was wrong. The Hokage's office was quiet, the usual mountains of paperwork thankfully absent. Tsunade stood by the large window, her back to the door, staring out at the lights of the village. The faint cheers and laughter of the post-festival crowds drifted up from the streets below. Kakashi Hatake leaned against a wall in the corner, his single visible eye closed, the picture of nonchalance. But he wasn't relaxed. His posture was too tense, his presence too alert. You put on a good show, Naruto, Tsunade said, not turning around. Her voice was heavy. I try, Naruto said. Stepping into the room, Shikamaru followed, closing the door behind them. I take it this isn't about noise complaints. I wish it were, she said, finally facing him. The lines on her face seemed deeper tonight. I just received a report. From the border. She slid a thin scroll across her desk. Naruto picked it up, his eyes scanning the neat, precise script of an Anbu field agent. Shikamaru and Kakashi watched him, their expressions grim. The report was brief, but every word was laced with a creeping horror. It detailed a small border town in the Land of Fire, a quiet place called Kinuta Town. Known for its weavers, all communication had ceased 24 hours ago. A 4-man Anbu recon team had been dispatched to investigate. Only one had returned. Naruto's hands tightened on the scroll. No signs of conflict, he read aloud, his voice low. No bodies, no structural damage. The town is pristine, but the people, the report calls them, hollows. They're alive, they breathe, they walk. But they do not speak. They do not react. Their eyes are empty. We tried to engage. A touch, a shout. Nothing. It's like they're gone. He looked up at Tsunade. What does that mean, gone? It was Kakashi who answered, pushing himself off the wall. The agent who made it back described it as a zone of absolute absence. He said when he got within 50 feet of the town square, he could feel it. A pressure, a void. It wasn't just quiet, it was a true, perfect silence. Not the absence of noise, but the negation of it. He said he felt his own emotions, his own sense of self, start to thin out. Like a watercolor painting in the rain. He fled. Shikamaru's mind was already racing, piecing it together. A genjutsu, a wide-scale auditory illusion. The agent was a genjutsu specialist. He said this was nothing like it, Tsunade said, her fists clenched on her desk. There was no chaotic chakra, no illusion to break. It was just empty. He described the chakra of the villagers as dormant, present, but utterly still, like a pond frozen solid. A cold dread, heavy and real, settled in Naruto's stomach. He thought of the vibrant, swirling ocean of chakra he had just witnessed in the valley, the living, breathing spirit of 200,000 people. The image of a frozen, silent pond was its perfect, horrifying antithesis. There's one more thing, Tsunade said, her gaze locking with his. Just before she left the tower, I had a visitor. Hinata Hyuga. Naruto's brow furrowed. Hinata. He knew who she was, of course. The shy, quiet Hyuga heiress. He'd seen her at his shows before. Always in the back, just watching. She came to report what she saw during your concert tonight, Tsunade continued. She used her Byakugan. She described your jutsu. How you use your chakra to resonate with and harmonize the chakra of others. How you create a unified, vibrant network of spiritual energy. Naruto remained silent, waiting for the other shoe to drop. A2WN of people whose chakra has been rendered inert, frozen into silence, Tsunade said, her voice barely a whisper. And a man who has perfected a jutsu that does the exact opposite on a massive scale. The timing is suspicious. The implication hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Shikamaru stepped forward, his laziness completely gone, replaced by a fierce, protective intelligence. You can't possibly be suggesting Naruto has anything to do with this. That's insane. His entire message is about connection, about life. This is the opposite of everything he is. I'm not suggesting anything, Tsunade said sharply. Though her eyes were filled with a weary conflict. I am stating the facts of a developing crisis. Right now, Naruto, your unique chakra signature is the only thing in the world we know of that interacts with people's spirits on this level. Whether you're the cause or the cure, you are at the center of this. Until we know more, you are a person of interest. Naruto looked down at the scroll, at the cold, terrifying words describing a silent town. He then looked at his own hands, the hands that had just brought joy and life to a valley of people. The idea that his power, his music, could somehow be connected to such a horror felt like a physical blow. But he wasn't the scared, angry child he used to be. He met Tsunade's gaze, his own eyes clear and hard as blue steel. What's your plan? He asked. The question was not a request. It was a demand. He was no longer just a Konoha shinobi asking for orders. He was a force in his own right, and they all knew it. Tsunade took a deep breath. A full-scale investigation. I'm locking down the area. I want to send in a team of specialists. An Ino-Shika-Cho formation for analysis, an Aburame for chakra particle tracking. And a medical nin to attempt to reverse the effects. You need a sensor, Kakashi added. One who can see what's happening on a spiritual level, not just a physical one. All eyes in the room fell on Naruto. He understood instantly. The conversation wasn't just about him being a suspect. It was about him being the only one who could truly understand what was happening. And there was only a person who could truly see what he was doing. You need Hinata Hyuga, Naruto stated. Tsunade nodded grimly. She's already been briefed. She's agreed. She sees what you do as a force for good. She believes this silent plague is an aberration, an anti-version of your music. A plan began to form in Naruto's mind, not a musical arrangement, but a strategic one. He was the most powerful weapon in this fight, and they all knew it. But a weapon was useless without someone who could aim it. Get me a map, Naruto said, his voice ringing with the same authority he wielded on stage. And get me Eve. Writhing, you know about the history of sound ninjutsu. This isn't a random plague. This is an attack. Someone created a jutsu designed to be the opposite of mine. They didn't just create silence. They declared war on sound itself. He looked out the window, at the village he had fought so hard to be accepted by, the world he was now trying to heal with his songs. The party was over. The tour was on hold. A new, terrible song was being written by an unknown enemy, and he was the only one who could hear it. The final encore would have to wait. Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2. Dissonant chords in the stone. Iwagakure was a fortress carved from the bones of the earth. Unlike the vibrant green of Konoha, it was a city of stone and shadow, of sharp angles and unyielding tradition. The very air felt heavier, compressed by the weight of the mountains that surrounded it and the stern, stubborn pride of its people. To them, the world was made of things you could break your fist on: rock, steel, and the will of the enemy. Softness was a weakness. Music was a distraction. For Naruto's road crew, it was a logistical nightmare. Every permit required a dozen chops from a dozen different scowling bureaucrats. The chosen venue wasn't a valley of cheering fans but a cavernous, acoustically dead quarry repurposed for the event. The local shinobi assigned to assist with security moved with a leaden reluctance. Their faces carved from the same impassive stone as their village. Leading this welcoming committee of granite was Kuretsuchi, granddaughter of the third Tsuchikage. She stood with her arms crossed, her short black hair and sharp, intelligent eyes taking in the chaos of the stage setup with a critical gaze. She wore the standard Iowa flak jacket, but she carried herself with an authority that had nothing to do with her uniform and everything to do with the blood in her veins. She was Onoki's granddaughter, and she radiated the same unshakable, grounded presence. Your primary amplifier is drawing too much power from the city's grid, she stated, her voice flat and direct. It wasn't a suggestion, it was an accusation. You'll cause a blackout in the lower districts. Shikamaru, who had been trying to negotiate with a particularly unhelpful foreman, rubbed the back of his neck with a sigh. We were assured the grid could handle it. It was in the rider. The rider was approved by the Trade Council. The power grid is managed by the Infrastructure Corps. They don't talk to each other, Kuretsuchi replied, as if this were the most obvious thing in the world. This is Iwagakure, not your freewheeling leaf village. Things are done a certain way here. You either adapt, or you fail. Naruto vaulted down from the stage, landing lightly on the dusty ground. He wiped a sheen of sweat from his brow with the back of his hand, his orange shirt a slash of defiant color in the gray landscape. Then we'll use our own power source, he said, his tone easy and unbothered. He nodded toward a series of large, sealed scrolls. Portable lightning-style capacitors. We can run the whole show off-grid if we have to. Kuretsuchi's eyes narrowed slightly. Independent power sources of that magnitude were not declared in your cargo manifest. It's rock and roll, Naruto said with a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. We always come prepared for a little resistance. His charisma, the easy confidence that swayed thousands, seemed to splash uselessly against her. She was a sea wall of pure pragmatism. See that you do, she said, before turning her attention to two of her shinobi, barking orders about perimeter patrols. She's a charmer, Naruto muttered to Shikamaru. She's Iowa royalty. They're taught to be charming like a rockslide, Shikamaru retorted, already calculating the new logistical hurdles. This whole stop is a drag. The Tsuchikage only agreed to it because a direct refusal would look like a political slight. But he's not going to make it easy. They see you as a cultural invasion. A wave of soft Konoha sentimentality that threatens to erode their will of stone. As if on cue, a new group approached. They were shinobi, but they wore no official flak jackets. They were dressed in dark, earth-toned robes, and they carried not kunai swords, but strangely shaped instruments. Oversized drums that looked like they were made of petrified wood, flutes carved from hollowed stalactites. And a stringed instrument that used taut, resonating wires of sharpened steel. The man in the lead was tall and severe, his face a mask of arrogant disdain. He stopped a few feet from Naruto, his eyes sweeping over the stage, the lights, and the crystalline amplifiers with open contempt. So this is the great Kyuubi, the man sneered, his voice a low gravelly rumble. The boy who deafens children with noise and calls it power. You disgrace the art of Otogaker. Naruto's easy-going expression tightened. The only thing I have in common with Otogaker is the Oto. My music isn't about killing people. Quote, isn't it? The man challenged, taking a step forward. You assault the senses. You overwhelm the spirit with cheap, fleeting emotion. It is a poison for the weak-willed. He gestured to his bandmates, practice the true art of sound. The Ganseki no Oto, the sound of the rock. A discipline, not a performance. Kuretsuchi stepped between them, her hand held up in a gesture that was both a warning and a command. Ishida, you are not on the approved list for this area. The man, Ishida, scoffed. I need no approval in my own village. We have come to issue a formal challenge. These outsiders will not be allowed to spew their sentimental filth in our home without it being answered. We challenge you, Konoha's golden child, to a duel. A battle of the bands. Your noise against our jutsu. Let the people of Iowa see for themselves what true power sounds like. The challenge hung in the air, sharp and heavy. It was a brilliant political move. If Naruto refused, he would be seen as a coward. If he accepted and lost, his influence, his entire message, would be publicly humiliated, validating the hardline traditionalists and dealing a blow to Konoha's soft power. Shikamaru was about to step in, to defuse the situation, to call it the political trap that it was, but Naruto answered first. Fine, he said, his blue eyes locking onto Ishida's. You want a show, I'll give you a show. Kuretsuchi's expression was unreadable, but a flicker of something, annoyance, or perhaps grudging respect, passed through her eyes before she turned away. I will inform the Tsuchikage. The quarry arena will be prepared by nightfall. Later that day, Kuretsuchi stood on a high scaffold overlooking the quarry, observing the final preparations. Her grandfather, T.H.E. diminutive but immensely powerful Onoki, floated beside her, his hands tucked into his sleeves. You see, granddaughter, Onoki said, his old voice creaking like shifting stone. This is what the Leaf's peace brings. Not treaties and trade, but this emotional circus. It's a weapon, make no mistake. Far more insidious than any new jutsu. It bypasses our walls and whispers directly to the hearts of our young. Many of the young are excited, Kuretsuchi noted, her gaze fixed on Naruto, who was on stage, personally tuning his guitar. He wasn't surrounded by adoring fans now. He was a craftsman, focused and precise. They say his music gives them hope. That it makes them feel connected to something more than just the village. And that is the danger, Onoki grunted. Loyalty to an idea is fleeting. Loyalty to your home, to the rock you stand on, that is what endures. Ishida is an arrogant fool, but his challenge serves a purpose. Tonight, Iwagakure will be reminded that sound can be a tool of discipline and strength. Not just feeling. He glanced at her. Your duty is to observe. Nothing more. Let this play out. A little public failure might be just what this rock star needs. Kuretsuchi didn't reply. She watched as a young girl, no older than 12, a genin from the demolition corps with a smudge of dirt on her cheek, shyly approached the stage. Naruto's security moved to intercept, but he waved them off. He leaned down, listening to the girl's whispered question. He smiled, a genuine, unguarded smile, and played a quick, complex riff on his guitar. The girl's eyes went wide with wonder. He wasn't performing for her, he was sharing something with her. For the first time, Kuretsuchi felt a flicker of doubt. She had dismissed him as a product, a carefully managed Konoha asset. But the look on that girl's face wasn't manufactured. It was real, and it was a look she rarely saw on the grim, determined faces of her own people. Night fell, and the quarry was transformed. The jagged rock walls were lit by harsh, industrial lights, making the arena feel less like a concert venue and more like a gladiatorial pit. The crowd was segregated, the older, more tradition. Shinobi and civilians gathered on one side, a silent, judgmental block. The younger generation, a smaller but more vibrant group, huddled on the other, their faces a mixture of excitement and apprehension. Ishida and the Ganseki no Oto took the stage first. Their performance was an assault. There was no melody, only a brutal, driving rhythm. Ishida slammed his hands onto his massive stone drums, and with each beat, a concussive wave of sound and chakra shot out, slamming into a series of massive boulders placed in the center of the arena. The boulders didn't just crack, they exploded into dust. His bandmates joined in, their flutes emitting high-frequency waves that made the audience's teeth ache, their steel-stringed instrument launching invisible blades of sound that sliced deep gouges into the quarry floor. This wasn't music, it was a demonstration of force. It was a martial kata converted into sound. It was sterile, powerful, and utterly devoid of emotion. This is the strength of Iowa, it screamed. This is power you can measure in shattered stone. The traditionalists roared their approval, their stoic faces finally breaking into grim smiles. Then, they finished, their final, deafening note echoing off the stone walls. Ishida stood, breathing heavily, a smug, triumphant look on his face. He had set the standard. He had shown them true power. Naruto walked onto the stage alone. He didn't even look at the pulverized remains of the boulders. He looked at the crowd, at the divided faces, the old and the young, the hopeful and the skeptical. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and played a single, clear note. It wasn't loud, it wasn't aggressive, it was a pure, resonant tone that seemed to sink into the very stone of the quarry. Where Ishida's sound had been an external force that shattered, Naruto's was an internal one that harmonized. The subtle, painful vibrations left in the air by the Ganseki no Oto were instantly soothed, the dissonant frequencies calmed. He began to play a slow, melodic ballad. The song spoke of deep roots, of the weight of history, of the strength it takes to stand firm against the ages. He wasn't singing about Iwagakure, but he was singing to it. He infused his chakra not into a concussive blast, but into a steady, resonant hum that flowed into the ground, up the stone walls, and into the hearts of the people. He wasn't trying to break the rock. He was trying to understand it. Ishida laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. Is this a joke? Are you trying to put us to sleep? This is not power. He and his band launched a direct attack. A unified wave of pure, concussive sound shot across the stage, aimed directly at Naruto. It was the same attack that had turned solid rock to powder. Naruto didn't move. His eyes snapped open, blazing with a sudden, fierce light. The gentle melody ceased. In its place, he struck a chord of raw, defiant power. The music exploded from him, a fast, driving anthem of rebellion. It wasn't the rebellion of a teenager. It was the rebellion of a survivor, of someone who had been told his entire life that he was a monster, a failure, a weapon to be contained. You build your cage of ancient stone. His voice ripped through the arena, a golden wave of chakra erupting from him, visible even to the naked eye. And tell me I must stand alone. The golden wave met the gray, concussive blast from Ishida. But it didn't block it. It didn't shatter it. It flowed around it, enveloped it, like the sea taking a rock. The raw, living emotion in Naruto's chakra song didn't negate the weaponized sound. It absorbed it, stealing its momentum, quieting its destructive purpose. My heart's a hammer, you hear the beat. He roared, stomping his foot, and the entire quarry floor resonated with the rhythm, a giant heartbeat of defiance. I'll tear down your walls. I'll own your street. Ishida and his band faltered, their own chakra being disrupted, thrown into chaos by the sheer emotional force of Naruto's music. Their sterile, disciplined jutsu had no defense against such a raw, untamed storm of feeling. It was like trying to stop a tsunami with a perfectly crafted but ultimately meaningless wall of paper. Naruto hit the final, triumphant chord, holding it, letting it ring out. The golden light flared, and for a moment, everyone in the quarry, from the youngest genin to Onoki himself, felt it. Not just heard it, they felt that unconquerable will, that refusal to be broken, that fierce, burning hope. The sound faded, silence. Then, from the side of the younger generation, a single person began to clap. Then another. Within seconds, the entire section was on its feet, cheering, shouting, their applause echoing with a passion that dwarfed the polite, grim approval the Ganseki no Oto had received. Even on the traditionalists' side, many of the younger shinobi looked stunned, their faces a mix of confusion and dawning wonder. They had witnessed a battle of jutsu, and the victor hadn't broken a single pebble. He had moved their very souls. Kuretsuchi stared, her arms no longer crossed. She finally understood. Ishida's power was the ability to destroy things. Naruto's power was the ability to change them. And she knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her bones, which one was stronger. An hour later, Naruto was packing his guitar into its case when Kuretsuchi appeared at the entrance to his tent. She didn't ask for permission, just stepped inside, her expression stripped of its earlier hostility, replaced by a complex, calculating respect. "You made my grandfather think," she said. "That's a more impressive feat than defeating Ishida." "All I did was play my music," Naruto replied, not looking up from his task. "No," she countered. "You showed them that strength isn't just about being the hardest thing in the world. Sometimes, it's about being the song that the mountain wants to sing." She paused, her gaze intense. "I thought you were a threat to Iwa's traditions. I was wrong. You're a threat to its stagnation." She stepped forward and placed a thin, official-looking scroll on a nearby crate. "What's this?" Naruto asked. "A preliminary field report from one of my deep-range patrols," she said, her voice dropping, losing its political edge and gaining a grim urgency. "It came in during your duel. A small, remote mining outpost in the Western Territories. Tsushigumo Village." Naruto stopped what he was doing, a cold feeling creeping up his spine. He slowly looked at her. "All communications ceased yesterday," Kuretsuchi continued, her eyes dark. "The patrol found no signs of a struggle. The miners are all there. They're just silent, empty." The captain of the patrol described the feeling in the air as a crushing void. A perfect, unnatural silence. She tapped the scroll. "My grandfather wanted to bury this. To handle it internally. To pretend it's not connected to the news we've heard from Konoha. But it is. I know it is." Naruto slowly picked up the scroll. Kinyuta Town. Now Tsushigumo Village. The dissonant, terrible chord of the enemy was playing again, its reach extending. This wasn't just a Konoha problem anymore. The silence was spreading. "Why are you showing me this?" Naruto asked, his voice low. "Because Ishida was wrong," Kuretsuchi said, her jaw set with the unyielding stubbornness of her village. "Your sound isn't a poison. It might be the only antidote. And this plague, it's in my home now. That makes it my problem." Chapter 2 End. Chapter 3. The Mistral's Melody. Kurigakure no Sato was a village learning to breathe again. For generations, it had been a place of choked secrets and whispered fears, its iconic mist serving not as a shield, but as a shroud. The era of the bloody mist had left scars on the very stones of its buildings. A psychological dampness that clung to everything. But now, under the fifth Mizukage, Meiturumi, the sun was finally beginning to pierce the gloom. The air, while still heavy with the salt of the sea, felt lighter. The oppressive silence had been replaced by the bustling sounds of a port city rediscovering its purpose, the clang of shipbuilders' hammers, the haggling of merchants in the marketplace. The laughter of academy students who would never have to face the barbaric graduation rituals of the past. Naruto's arrival was met with a cautious but genuine enthusiasm. Here, he wasn't a political threat or a cultural invader. He was a symbol of the new world, a living embodiment of the radical idea that a village's Jinchuriki could be a hero, not just a weapon to be locked away. The children waved small, hand-drawn flags with his nine-tailed fox emblem, and the younger shinobi greeted him with smiles that reached their eyes. Yet, the scars remained. In the shadows of the new, brightly lit streets, older figures watched his procession, their faces hard and unreadable. They were the ones who had thrived in the darkness, the ones who saw the new light not as a dawn, but as a blinding glare that exposed them. From a high, mist-shrouded rooftop, a lone figure watched him pass. She was lean and lithe, clad in the dark, practical attire of a hunter nin, a porcelain mask with a simple, elegant design resting on the side of her head. Her name was Yuzuki, and her eyes missed nothing. She noted the formation of his Konoha security detail, the subtle gaps in their perimeter. She saw the anbu posted on the surrounding buildings, their chakra signatures barely suppressed, loyal to the Mizukage, but still Kiri-trained, which meant they were watching for betrayal from every direction, even from within. Yuzuki's gaze was not one of adoration. It was the sharp, analytical stare of a predator assessing its territory. Naruto Uzumaki was not a celebrity to her. He was a symbol, and in the current climate of Kurigakure, symbols were fragile things that attracted predators of a different sort. Her brother had been one of the last casualties of the old regime, executed for possessing a minor ice-release Kekkei Genkei, a bloodline deemed impure. The Mizukage's reforms, inspired in part by the global shift in attitude that Naruto's fame had helped champion, had come just months too late for him. Yuzuki's loyalty to the new Kiri was therefore not a matter of politics, but a debt of blood. Protecting the symbol was a way of honoring the dead. She saw a flicker of movement in an alleyway across the street. Two men, their faces concealed by hoods, passing a small, sealed scroll. Their posture was wrong, too tense, too deliberate. Yuzuki melted into the mist, her presence vanishing so completely it was as if the rooftop she'd been standing on was now empty and had always been. The Mizukage's office was a stark contrast to the stone austerity of Iwagakure or the organized clutter of Konoha. It was an open, airy space with large windows overlooking the bay, the salty mist rolling right up to the glass. Mei Terumi, the fifth Mizukage, greeted Naruto with a warm, genuine smile that was only slightly undermined by the predatory glint in her eyes. "Naruto-kun," she said, her voice a pleasant melody. "It is a genuine pleasure to have you. Your music has done more to heal the rifts between our younger generation and the world than a dozen treaties ever could." "I'm just glad you let us play, Mizukage-sama," Naruto replied, offering a respectful bow. Chojuro, the nervous young swordsman of the Seven Swordsmen, stood beside her, blushing furiously and clutching the handle of his massive blade, Haramakare. "Please, call me Mei. We're all friends of progress here," she said, gesturing for him to sit. "However, progress always has its enemies." Her smile tightened. "There are still elements within this village who preferred the old ways. Who believe my reforms, my opening of our borders, is a sign of weakness. They are a small faction, but they are dangerous. They are veterans of the purges, masters of the silent killing technique." The name of the technique sent a subtle chill through the room. It was the signature art of the Bloody Mist, a method of assassination that was as terrifying as it was effective. "We are taking every precaution," Mei continued. "My most loyal Anbu are overseeing security. But I must ask you to be vigilant. To these relics, you are not a musician. You are the embodiment of the weakness they despise. An attack on you is an attack on everything I have built." Naruto's expression was serious. "I understand. We won't underestimate them." "Good," Mei said, her smile returning, though it now held a sharper edge. "Now, on to more pleasant topics. Tell me, Naruto-kun, a man of your passion, must have some very strong feelings about the bonds between villages." Before Naruto could get drawn into the Mizukage's infamous conversational traps, an Anbu appeared at the door with a quiet hiss of displaced air. He knelt, offering the Mizukage a small scroll. Mei's expression turned grim as she read it. "It seems our conversation about threats was more timely than I knew," she said, her voice losing its playful tone. "I have just received a report from our patrol of the outer islands. We have lost contact with the fishing settlement on Yosame Island. It has gone completely silent." The word hit Naruto like a physical blow. First Konoha, then Iwa, now Kiri. The plague was spreading faster than he had traveled. It was no longer a series of isolated incidents. It was a coordinated, creeping invasion. "The report mentions the same details," Mei said, her eyes boring into his. "No signs of a struggle. Just an unnerving, total absence. My people are calling it the misty silence." Naruto stood up, his fists clenched. The concert tonight was no longer just a performance. It was a statement. It was a beacon of sound and life pushed back against a tide of creeping emptiness. "Thank you for your honesty, Mizukage-sama. We'll be ready." The stage was a masterpiece of Kiri engineering. A massive, circular platform floating in the center of the bay, connected to the shore by a single, heavily guarded bridge. The audience watched from a fleet of boats of all sizes, from small family skiffs to larger merchant vessels, all bobbing gently on the calm water, their lights turning the bay into a constellation of floating stars. The acoustics were magnificent, the sound carrying perfectly across the water, the mist diffusing the stage lights into a soft, ethereal glow. Naruto's first few songs were a perfect match for the atmosphere. They were more melodic, less aggressive than his usual fare, songs of searching and longing, of finding light in the fog. The crowd was captivated, their chakra, visible to Naruto's heightened senses as a soft, blue-green aura, rising and falling with the music, a gentle tide of shared emotion. As he transitioned into a more upbeat, hopeful anthem, he felt it. A change in the air. The natural sea mist was suddenly thickening, becoming colder, denser. It rolled across the water, swallowing the boats in the back, its tendrils creeping onto the stage itself. Within a minute, visibility was reduced to less than 10 feet. The ethereal glow became a blinding, disorienting whiteout. Panic began to ripple through the crowd, their gentle chakra signatures flaring with sharp points of fear. Technical difficulties, folks, Naruto shouted into the microphone, his voice a calm anchor in the confusion. He slung his guitar onto his back and struck a loud, sharp chord that wasn't part of any song. It was a pure pulse of chakra, not designed for melody, but for echolocation. For a split second, the world was illuminated to his senses. He saw the panicked shapes on the boats, the Anbu on the bridge trying to maintain order. And he saw them on the stage. 6 figures. They hadn't been there a second ago. They moved with no sound, their feet making no noise on the wooden stage. They were ghosts in the fog, clad in dark gray, their faces hidden by old, snarling Kiri masks. They held blades that dripped with water and poison. Silent killing. The first one lunged, his blade aimed at Naruto's throat. Naruto didn't dodge. He pivoted, grabbing the assassin's wrist, and used his momentum to spin him around, slamming him into a second attacker who was materializing from the mist behind him. At the same time, Naruto channeled a concentrated burst of chakra into the strings of his guitar, creating a sharp, localized sonic blast, string shot, that sent the 2 assassins stumbling back, disoriented. Another appeared at his side, sword swinging for his head. A blur of motion intercepted him. Yuzuki. She appeared as if she had been sculpted from the mist itself. One moment, there was nothing. The next, she was there, her twin Kodachi blades a silver arc in the gloom. She parried the assassin's strike with one blade and drove the other into the gap in his armor at the shoulder. There was no wasted movement, no triumphant shout. Just a quiet, efficient, and utterly lethal grace. She twisted her blade and shoved the now limp body off the stage and into the dark water below. She didn't look at Naruto. Her eyes were constantly moving, scanning the impenetrable wall of white. 4 more, she said. Her voice a low, steady whisper. On the stage, at least 10 more in the water, targeting the support buoys. Who the hell are you? Naruto asked, pulling his guitar back into position. A fan of the new Kiri, she replied, her Kodachi held in a reverse grip. Watch your 6. 2 assassins lunged at Naruto from the front. He met them head-on. He wasn't a technician like Yuzuki. He was a force of nature. He swept his guitar like a club, its body reinforced with chakra, and a thunderous, dissonant chord exploded on impact with the first assassin's blade, shattering it and sending the man flying. The second attacker thrust a tanto at his ribs, but Naruto simply let the blow land, an invisible shield of golden chakra flaring to life, stopping the blade cold. He grabbed the man's arm and threw him into the mist. While he was occupied, a third assassin materialized directly behind him. Before Naruto could even turn, Yuzuki was already moving. She threw a Ingelsenbon needle that struck the assassin in the back of the neck. He froze, his body locked by a fast-acting paralytic agent. She flowed past him, her blades a whisper, and engaged the final assassin. Sin on the stage in a dizzying dance of steel. It was over in seconds. The buoys, Naruto said, his eyes scanning the water. He couldn't see them, but he could feel the vibrations as the assassins below began to sabotage the stage's flotation seals. The whole platform began to list dangerously to one side. I'll handle the ones in the water, Yuzuki said. Without another word, she ran to the edge of the tilting stage and dove into the black, mist-shrouded water without a sound, vanishing completely. Naruto was alone on the stage. He closed his eyes, ignoring the tilting ground beneath his feet. He focused, drawing in a massive amount of chakra. He wasn't a hunter nin. He couldn't fight them in their world, so he would force them into his. He slammed his hands down on the strings of his guitar, releasing not a song, but a single, pure, omnidirectional wave of sonic chakra. It was his most powerful echolocation pulse, the nine-tails sonar. The blast of sound and energy ripped outward, tearing through the mist, stripping it away from the stage in a perfect, 100-meter circle. For a moment, Everything was revealed. The assassins in the water froze, exposed and blinded by the sudden clarity. The crowd on the boats gasped as the impenetrable fog was violently torn away. And in the water, they saw Yuzuki. She was a whirlwind of death, her blades flashing as she moved between the submerged assassins. A trail of blood blossoming in the dark water behind her. Exposed by Naruto's sonic blast, her enemies had nowhere to hide. She dispatched the last two with brutal efficiency. The stage stabilized. The immediate threat was gone. The mist, no longer sustained by the assassins, jutsu, began to recede to its natural state. Mei's Anbu swarmed the bridge, securing the stage. Naruto stood in the center of it all, his guitar humming with residual power. He looked down at the water. A moment later, Yuzuki surfaced, pulling herself effortlessly back onto the stage, her clothes dripping, her face serene. As if she had just gone for a brisk swim. She gave him a short, professional nod. Threat neutralized, she said. Later, after the chaos had subsided and the captured assassins were being interrogated, Naruto found Yuzuki on a quiet pier, staring out at the sea. Her mask was back on, covering her face. "I owe you one," Naruto said, walking up beside her. "No, you don't," she replied, her voice slightly muffled by the porcelain. "I was protecting my home. You were the target, but the Mizukage was the message." "Still," Naruto insisted, "your timing was pretty good. You a censor?" "No," she said, "I'm a hunter. I spent the last 2 days hunting. I knew they were planning something. I just didn't know when or where. So I watched you." He fell silent for a moment, listening to the gentle lapping of the waves. The silent killing, it's terrifying. The silence, his voice trailed off, his mind connecting the assassins, technique to the spreading plague. One was a jutsu, the other a phenomenon. But they both stemmed from the same horrifying concept, the absence of life, of sound. "There are all kinds of silence, Naruto-sama," Yuzuki said quietly, turning to face him. "There is the silence of the hunter, which is a tool, and there is the silence of the grave, which is an end. The silence that is spreading across the nations, that is the second kind." She reached up and removed her mask. Her face was young, framed by dark hair, but her eyes were ancient, filled with a grief and determination that went far beyond her years. "My brother died in silence, another nameless victim of the old ways. Your music is the loudest thing I've ever heard. It's the sound of a world where boys like him get to live." She held out her hand. "I'm Yuzuki, and I believe my skills would be of better use helping you fight the coming silence than hunting rogue nin in the mist." Naruto looked at her, at the fierce, unwavering loyalty in her eyes. It wasn't the loyalty of a fan to a star. It was the loyalty of a soldier to a cause. He took her hand and shook it firmly. "Welcome to the tour," he said. Chapter 3 End. Chapter 4. Desert Rose Serenade. The wind in Sunagaku carried the taste of grit and eternity. It was a constant, scouring presence that shaped the land and the people, wearing away anything soft, leaving only what was hard, patient, and resilient. The village itself was a collection of bulbous, sand-colored domes, a stark contrast to the angular stone of Iwa or the misty spires of Kiri. It was a city that did not fight the desert, but had learned to bow to its power, to exist within its unforgiving embrace. Their welcome was a formal, sterile affair, conducted in the cool shade of the Keiskage's administrative dome. There was no cheering crowd, only a line of elite Suna-jonin. Their faces wrapped in turbans, their expressions as unreadable as the dunes. At their head stood a woman whose presence was as sharp and cutting as the wind outside. Tamari, sister of the Keiskage and the Sands official diplomatic liaison, held a lacquered fan in one hand and a formidable aura of impatience in the other. Her teal eyes swept over Naruto's entourage, the Konoha security, the roadies. The newly added, quietly lethal presence of Yuzuki, and her lips thinned in disapproval. "Uzumaki-san," she began, her voice crisp and formal, foregoing any honorifics that might suggest friendship. "On behalf of the Keiskage, I welcome you to Sunagaku. Your itinerary has been approved, and your resource allocation permits have been finalized. Water is a finite commodity. Your crew will adhere to the strict rationing schedule provided." "Thanks. We're happy to be here," Naruto replied, his easygoing tone a stark contrast to her rigid formality. "Happiness is not a logistical consideration. Tamari stated coolly. Your presence here is the result of a direct request from the cage, a gesture of goodwill to our allies in Konoha. My duty is to ensure that this gesture does not compromise the security or stability of this village. She snapped her fan open with a sharp thwack, revealing 3 purple circles. You will have a full Suna escort at all times. Your movements will be restricted to the designated zones. Any deviation will be considered a breach of our agreement. Shikamaru stepped forward, a weary look on his face. Tamari-san, we understand your concerns. But the entire point of this tour is to foster connection, not to be treated like a potential security risk. With all due respect, Nara-san, Temari's eyes narrowed, a foreign Jinshu. Riki with the power to influence the emotions of thousands, arriving with a private army of technicians and hangers-on, is the very definition of a security risk. Your connection is a variable I cannot control. Therefore, I will control everything else. Before the diplomatic ice could thicken further, a calm, quiet voice echoed from the hallway. That is enough, Tamari. Gaara, the 5th cage, emerged from the shadows. He wore his official robes and the large cage hat, but his posture was relaxed, his seafoam green eyes fixed on Naruto with a rare, genuine warmth. The ever-present gourd of sand was strapped to his back, a silent testament to the power he held in reserve. Gaara, Naruto said, a wide, honest grin breaking across his face. Naruto, Gaara replied with a slight nod. He turned to his sister. He is not a risk. He is my friend, and he is a guest of this village. See that he is treated as such. Temari's jaw tightened, but she bowed her head in assent. As you command, Kazekage-sama. Her deference was to the office, not the order. Her protectiveness of her younger brother was a fierce, palpable thing, and it was clear she viewed Naruto's influence over him with deep suspicion. Later, in a private antechamber, Gaara and Naruto spoke, Tamari standing guard by the door, her fan held tight. The reports from Iwa and Kiri have reached us, Gaara said, his voice a low, sandy rumble. Kuretsuchi of the Stone sent a coded message. She believes, as you do, that the silent zones are a coordinated attack. It's a plague, Gaara. And it's spreading, Naruto said, his expression grim. Someone is trying to silence the world. Then you must be louder, Gaara stated, his logic simple and profound. He looked out the window at the vast, endless desert. When I was young, this village feared my sound, the screaming of the beast within me. Now, they will hear your sound, and they will see that it is one of hope. His faith in Naruto was absolute, a solid pillar in a world of shifting political sands. Tamari listened from the doorway, her expression unreadable. She had dedicated her life to protecting Gaara, to navigating the treacherous political landscape that had once sought to destroy him. She had done so with strategy, with threats, with carefully worded treaties. This blind faith in a rock star from a rival village, it felt reckless. It felt dangerous. She saw Naruto not as a friend, but as a foreign power with an unknown agenda, a charismatic cult leader whose emotional weapon could just as easily be turned against them. The concert was set for sunset in the Great Dune Sea, a vast expanse of sand just beyond the village walls. The stage was a simple, flat platform, looking like a tiny raft on an ocean of gold. As the sun began its descent, the sky in fiery shades of orange and purple, a massive crowd of Suna villagers gathered, their quiet discipline a stark contrast to the wild energy of Konoha or the tense curiosity of Iwa. Naruto's first song was a quiet, almost mournful melody that mirrored the lonely beauty of the desert. It spoke of endurance, of solitude, of the strength found in an unyielding landscape. The music flowed over the crowd, and he could feel their chakra signatures, tightly controlled, reserved, like deep wells, begin to resonate, opening up just a little. He built the energy slowly, song by song, his music becoming a powerful, driving rhythm that echoed the desert wind, a sound of freedom and endless horizons. The younger shinobi began to lose their rigid postures, their bodies moving to the beat. Even some of the older, more stoic villagers were tapping their feet, their stern expressions softening. Tamari watched from a command post on a high dune, flanked by a squad of Jonin. She had to admit, the man was effective. He was weaving a spell over her people, dismantling their cultural reserve with every chord. It was impressive, and deeply unsettling. It was during the climax of his most powerful anthem, a song about breaking free from the prisons of the past, that the ground began to tremble. It started as a low, deep vibration that was at first mistaken for the bass from the amplifiers. But it grew, intensifying. The very dunes around them beginning to shift and ripple. A collective gasp went through the crowd. The Suna shinobi instantly snapped into formation, kunai drawn, their expressions grim. "What is that?" Shikamaru yelled over the music. Temari's eyes were wide with a dawning horror. She knew the legends. It can't be. 100 meters from the stage, the sand exploded upwards. A colossal shape erupted from beneath the desert, a creature of nightmare and legend. It was an armored scorpion the size of a small mountain, its carapace the color of saffron and gold, its multiple eyes burning with a malevolent, ancient light. Its massive tail, tipped with a stinger that dripped a black, viscous venom, rose high into the air, eclipsing the last rays of the setting sun. "The Kodo-o!" a Jonin screamed. "The Saffron King! It's awake!" Panic erupted. The crowd surged back toward the village, a wave of terror breaking the spell of the music. "Evacuation protocols! Now!" Temari roared, her voice cutting through the chaos. She snapped open her fan, her strategic mind taking instant command. "Konkuro, your squad, defensive perimeter. Delay it. Do not engage directly. I want aerial support teams laying down suppressing fire. Go." She leapt into action, using her giant fan to create powerful gusts of wind, not to attack the beast, but to shield the fleeing civilians. To literally blow the slower-moving ones towards the safety of the village gates. She was a force of nature in her own right, a whirlwind of controlled, life-saving fury. The Suna shinobi fought with desperate courage. Konkuro summoned his puppets, unleashing a volley of poison senbon that bounced harmlessly off the Kodo-o's thick armor. It only enraged the beast further. It slammed its massive claws into the sand, sending a shockwave that cracked the very stage Naruto stood on. Naruto stared at the colossal creature, his song cut short. Everyone expected him to fight, to gather his chakra, to unleash some devastating blast of sound that would match the creature's might. He could feel the power welling up inside him, the feral energy of the nine tails eager to meet this new threat. But, as he looked into the beast's glowing eyes, he didn't see malice. He saw confusion, agony. It hadn't woken up to rampage. It had been disturbed. His chakra, his music, resonating deep, deep beneath the sand, had been an alarm clock, dragging it from a sleep that had lasted for centuries. It was his fault. While Temari and her shinobi fought to save their people, Naruto made a choice. He turned back to his microphone, his expression serene. He took a breath, and began to play again. But it was not a song of battle. There was no driving beat, no defiant roar. A new melody filled the air, soft and gentle. It was a lullaby, a simple, ancient tune, the kind a mother might hum to a restless child. He poured his chakra into it, not as a weapon, but as an apology. He shaped it into a wave of pure, unadulterated calm. A spiritual balm meant to soothe, not to conquer. The effect was instantaneous. The Kodo-o, which had been about to bring a massive claw down on Konkuro's puppets, froze. Its head tilted, its burning eyes fixing on the small figure on the broken stage. The furious thrashing of its tail slowed. The aggressive hissing died in its throat, replaced by a low, questioning chitter. Naruto's music washed over it. The lullaby spoke of deep, quiet sleep, of the cool sand of the deep desert, of the peaceful silence of eternity. It was a plea for forgiveness, an offering of peace. Temari, in the midst of conjuring another protective gale, stopped and stared, mesmerized. The shinobi, who had been preparing for a suicidal last stand, lowered their weapons, their faces a mixture of disbelief and awe. Slowly, majestically, the Saffron King began to sink. Its massive legs folded, its claws retracted. The burning light in its eyes softened, dimmed, and then extinguished, replaced by the placid darkness of slumber. With a final, deep sigh that sounded like the shifting of continents, the colossal beast sank back beneath the sand, disappearing as if it had never been there. The desert became still once more. The only sound the last, fading notes of Naruto's lullaby hanging in the twilight air. Exhaustion hit Naruto like a physical blow. The sheer amount of chakra and control required for such a feat was immense. He staggered, catching himself on the microphone stand, his body drenched in sweat. Later, As the last of the shaken civilians were accounted for, Temari approached him. The sun had fully set, and the desert was cool, the stars brilliant in the black sky. Her fan was closed, her face was stripped of its diplomatic mask, leaving only a raw, stunned respect. Legends say the Kodo-o is the living spirit of the desert, she said, her voice quiet. Angering, it is said to bring a century of drought. No one has ever seen it and lived. They say it cannot be fought. I didn't fight it, Naruto said, his voice hoarse. I woke it up. It was only right that I put it back to sleep. Temari looked at him, truly looked at him, for the first time. She had seen him as a political tool, a chaotic force. A threat to be managed. But she had just witnessed him face down a godlike power that her entire village would have been helpless against, and he had defeated it not with force, but with compassion. With control. He had risked his own life to soothe the monster he had accidentally provoked, all while her shinobi were focused only on destroying it. We were wrong about you, she said. The admission costing her a piece of her pride, but she offered it willingly. I was wrong. She took a deep breath. Gaara received another report this morning, before your concert. A small trading caravan, on the spice route near the border of the Land of Wind. They were found, silent. Their bodies were fine, but their minds, their spirits, were gone. We logged it as an enemy action, a new type of genjutsu. But it's the same as the others, isn't it? Naruto nodded grimly. The silence had reached the sand. Temari's eyes hardened with a new, fierce resolve. My entire life has been about strategy. About seeing the whole board, not just the pieces in front of me. This plague, it's not a series of random attacks. It's a campaign. And it needs to be met with a counter-campaign. She looked from Naruto to the vast, dark desert, then back again. You are the weapon, Uzumaki. Your music is the only thing that seems to counter this. But a weapon is useless without a strategy. You need a planner. Someone who can predict the enemy's moves, manage logistics across nations, and turn this, tour, into a coordinated military operation. She took a step closer, her voice dropping. Filled with the unyielding strength of her village. Let me help you. Let me be your strategist. Chapter 4 End. Chapter 5. Thunder in the Harmony. Kumogakure was a village built on the principle of overwhelming force. Perched atop colossal, cloud-wreathed mountains, it was a place of thunder and steel, of powerful pride and unwavering martial tradition. Their shinobi were known for their speed, their strength, and their absolute loyalty to their leader, the fourth Raikage, a man whose diplomatic style was often indistinguishable from a physical assault. There was no negotiation. There was no welcome. Naruto's convoy was met at the heavily fortified border of the Land of Lightning by a squadron of Kumo shinobi led by Darui, the Raikage's right-hand man. He was the picture of Kumo's relaxed confidence. A languid slouch that did nothing to hide the immense power coiled beneath. Yo, Darui said, his tone perpetually bored. He unrolled a scroll that bore the Raikage's official seal. Message from the boss. The musical performance and public gathering proposed by the Konoha operative known as Kyubi is hereby denied. His influence is deemed a potential disruption to the military discipline and morale of this village. Any attempt to circumvent this decree will be met with maximum force. Signed, A. 4th Raikage. He rolled the scroll back up. Dull, I know, but he's pretty set on it. So, you can turn your little parade right around. Shikamaru stepped forward, ready to launch into a carefully prepared diplomatic argument about alliances and cultural exchange, but Naruto put a hand on his shoulder. He looked past Darui, up at the towering mountains where Kumo was hidden amongst the clouds. He could feel it from here, a roiling, frustrated energy. The Raikage had slammed a door, but he hadn't silenced the people behind it. We understand, Naruto said, his voice calm and even, betraying none of his frustration. We'll respect the Raikage's decree. Darui raised a skeptical eyebrow. He'd expected an argument, a flash of the famous Uzumaki temper. This easy acquiescence was suspicious. Glad to hear it. It's a long trip back to the Land of Fire. Try not to cause any trouble on your way out. With a final, lazy salute, he and his squadron vanished in a flicker of lightning-infused speed. Respect his decree, Shikamaru hissed as they watched them go. That's it. We just turn back. This is a massive political insult, Naruto. It makes us look weak. No, Naruto said, a slow, determined grin spreading across his face. It makes him look scared. He turned to his crew. We're not leaving. We're making camp, just outside his borders. And do what? Temari challenged, her arms crossed. Stare at his mountains until he changes his mind. The Raikage doesn't change his mind. He breaks things against it until they fit his worldview. We wait, Naruto said, his eyes gleaming with a rebellious light. Because when you tell people they can't have something, you just make them want it more. The concert isn't cancelled, it's just become exclusive. 2 nights later, their camp was a small, quiet island in the vast, rocky landscape. The Kumo border patrols were a constant presence. Flashes of lightning chakra zipping along the ridges, ensuring the Raikage's order was obeyed. The flap of Naruto's tent was thrown open without warning. A young Wo, man with dark skin and fiery red hair styled in 2 buns stood there, her fists on her hips, a look of profound indignation on her face. Behind her, a lanky, dark-skinned young man with white hair chewed nervously on a lollipop stick. Are you Naruto Uzumaki? The woman demanded, her voice a sharp crackle of energy. Naruto looked up from his guitar. Last I checked, I'm Karui. This is Omoi, she said, jabbing a thumb at her companion. And we think what the Raikage is doing is a load of crap. Omoi sighed dramatically. Now they know who we are. They'll probably capture us, interrogate us, and that'll lead them back to our friends, and then our families, and then the entire village will be branded as traitors. We'll have to live in exile. Have you seen the price of food in the land of Earth? It's outrageous. We'll probably starve. Karui ignored him, her intense red eyes fixed on Naruto. We've been listening to your music for years. Bootleg recordings smuggled out of Konoha. It's the only thing that doesn't sound like a damn training drill. You sing about not letting the old fossils dictate your life. So what are you doing just sitting out here? He's respecting a diplomatic decree to avoid an international incident. Shikamaru interjected from the corner of the tent, his voice laced with tired sarcasm. Sounds like cowardice to me, Karui shot back, unapologetic. Naruto chuckled. He liked her. She had the same fire he did. I was waiting for an invitation. Karui's aggressive posture softened into a conspiratorial grin. Good. We're giving you one. There's a place, Hidden Valley in the Turtle Island mountain range. They call it the Valley of Screaming Echoes. Sound carries funny in there. What happens in the valley, stays in the valley. We've got a couple hundred people who are willing to risk a lightning flicker up the backside from the Raikage to be there. We can get you in, past the patrols. If you're willing to take the risk. The risk is insane, Shikamaru stated flatly. Sneaking past Kumo's elite border guard. Into their territory, against the Raikage's direct order. This isn't a concert, it's a declaration of war. No, Temari said, her strategic mind lighting up. It's a statement of influence. If he pulls this off, he proves the Raikage doesn't control the hearts of his own people. Politically, it's a masterstroke, if you survive. Naruto stood up, slinging his guitar over his shoulder. He looked at Karui, at the fierce, defiant hope in her eyes. It was the same hope he saw everywhere he went, the same hunger for a future that wasn't defined by the wars of the past. When do we leave? He asked. Moving through the land of lightning at night was like navigating a thunderstorm. Kumo patrols didn't just walk, they flared, covering mi. Less in seconds with the body flicker technique, their movements like stray bolts of lightning. Stay low and keep your chakra suppressed to a pinpoint, Karui whispered, her voice a tense hiss. She led the small group, Naruto, Yuzuki, and herself, through a narrow, winding canyon. Shikamaru and Temari were coordinating a diversion on the other side of the border, a large, flashy but ultimately Harem's light and sound show to draw the patrol's attention. They look for chakra signatures, not bodies. If we get caught, they'll put us in the Raikage's personal prison, Omoi fretted from the rear. I hear the food is terrible. And what if I drop my lollipop? I only brought 3. Shut up, Omoi, Karui snapped. Suddenly, she held up a fist, and the group froze. Above them, on the canyon rim, a flicker of blue light. A patrol. They were close. Too close. Karui pointed to a narrow fissure in the canyon wall, barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through. In here, now. They pressed themselves into the cold rock as the patrol zipped past overhead, the crackle of their chakra making the air hum. Yuzuki was a statue of perfect stillness. Naruto controlled his breathing, his massive reserves shrunk down to a tiny, flickering candle flame. As the patrol's chakra signature faded, Karui motioned them forward. This is the tricky part. The next pass is a sensor field. They'll detect any active chakra network. No matter how small, we have to move through it between the patrol sweeps. How long is the gap? Yuzuki asked, her voice a quiet whisper. 12 seconds, Karui replied grimly. 12 seconds to cross 200 meters of open ground. Omoi moaned. My legs are already cramping just thinking about it. What if I trip? They'll be on us in a flash. We'll be vaporized. Then don't trip, Karui said. She looked at Naruto. Can you move that fast without flaring your chakra? Naruto grinned. I can do better. He laid a hand on Karui's shoulder and another on Yuzuki's. He didn't flare his own power. Instead, he subtly resonated with theirs, using his precise control to enhance their natural abilities, like a master musician tuning an instrument. On your mark. Rui's eyes widened as she felt a surge of clean, efficient energy flow into her, sharpening her senses, lightening her feet. She watched the distant ridge, waiting. The last flicker of a passing patrol vanished. Go. They didn't run. They exploded. They moved like blurs of shadow across the moonlit ground, their feet barely seeming to touch the rock. It was a silent, breathtaking burst of speed. They cleared the sensor field and dove behind a rock outcropping just as the next patrol flared into existence on the ridge, the entire crossing taking less than 9 seconds. Omoi stumbled in behind them, pale and out of breath. I swallowed a bug. Karui stared at Naruto, a new level of respect in her eyes. He hadn't just used his own power, he had made her stronger. They continued on, a silent, fast-moving team. Karui's knowledge of the land and Naruto's subtle enhancements allowing them to slip through the net of one of the most secure nations in the world. The Valley of Screaming Echoes was a natural amphitheater, a deep bowl in the mountains where the wind created a constant, low moan. But tonight, it was filled with a different sound, the hushed, excited whispers of Severa. 100 young Kumo shinobi and civilians, their faces lit by the glow of a makeshift stage powered by portable battery seals. When Naruto, Karui, and the others emerged from the pass, a wave of and excitement went through the crowd. This wasn't a concert, it was a conspiracy, a secret meeting of rebels, and the shared risk made the energy 1,000 times more potent. Naruto stepped onto the stage, no lights, no giant amplifiers, just him and his guitar. He looked out at the faces, so young, so determined, and he felt a surge of pride. Heard you guys wanted a show, he said into the mic. And the valley erupted in a defiant cheer. The music was raw, stripped down, and powerful. It was just Naruto, his guitar, and his voice, but it was more than enough. He poured all the frustration, all the defiance, all the energy of their infiltration into the performance. It wasn't a show, it was a release. The crowd sang along, their voices joining his, a unified anthem of rebellion echoing off the valley walls. A sound of thunderous harmony that the Raikage, in his high tower, could never hope to hear. It was in the middle of his final song, a furious, triumphant track about breaking chains, that the harmony shattered. A figure landed in the middle of the crowd. It wasn't a Kumo patrol. It was a man, dressed in the tattered remains of a Kumo Jonin's uniform. He moved with a horrifying, unnatural speed, his head lolling at an odd angle. His eyes were wide, milky white, and utterly vacant. There was no chakra signature, no life, no spirit. There was only a cold, predatory void. A hollow. Before anyone could react, the hollow lashed out. It didn't use jutsu. It was pure, brutal taijutsu. An open palmed strike to the chest of a young shinobi sent him flying back 20 feet, his ribs audibly cracking. It moved through the terrified crowd, a silent, emotionless killing machine. The music stopped. The cheers turned to screams. Karui drew the sword she carried on her back. Get the civilians out of here. She roared at Omoi, before launching herself at the creature. She was a master of the Kumo-style kenjutsu, a whirlwind of powerful, precise strikes. Her blade flashed, aimed for the hollow's neck. But the creature simply tilted its head with an impossible, joint-snapping speed, letting the blade skim past. It countered with a backhand blow that sent Karui staggering back, her arm numb from the sheer, unfeeling force of the impact. Naruto jumped from the stage. "Get back," he yelled at her. He struck a sharp, concussive chord on his guitar, a sonic blast that should have sent the creature flying. The blast hit the hollow square in the chest, and did almost nothing. The creature barely flinched, the sound seeming to be absorbed by the void that surrounded it. It was like shouting at a black hole. It lunged at Naruto. The fight was a brutal, desperate brawl. Naruto's sound-based attacks, his primary weapon, were nearly useless. He was forced to rely on pure taijutsu, dodging the hollow's relentless, inhumanly fast strikes. The creature felt no pain, no exhaustion. It didn't even breathe. It was a puppet, a shell animated by some terrible, silent force. Naruto managed to land a solid kick to the hollow's side, but it was like kicking a statue made of iron. The hollow grabbed his leg, its grip crushingly strong, and threw him through the makeshift stage, splintering wood and metal. Karui rejoined the fray, her sword a red blur, creating an opening. "It doesn't react, it just acts," she yelled, her frustration and fear evident in her voice. Naruto pulled himself from the wreckage, his mind racing. Sound didn't work. Raw physical force was barely enough. The creature wasn't alive. It was an absence. A void. How do you fight an absence? You fill it. The hollow charged him again. This time, Naruto didn't meet it with a blow. He dropped his guitar and met its charge head-on, grabbing its arms. He forced it to a standstill, muscle straining against unnatural strength. He looked into its empty, milky eyes. And then he poured his own chakra into it. It wasn't a gentle, healing wave. It was a raw, untamed flood of pure, golden life force. He didn't try to heal the hollow. He tried to overwhelm the emptiness inside it, to fill the void with so much chaotic, emotional energy that it would tear itself apart. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the hollow began to twitch. Its limbs spasmed. A low, guttural moan escaped its lips, the first sound it had made. Its empty eyes flickered, and for a split second, Naruto saw a flash of a person, Akumo Jonin. His face a mask of unimaginable terror and confusion, a soul trapped behind the silence. Then, with a final, silent scream that Naruto felt in his spirit rather than his ears, the hollow's body went rigid and then collapsed, crumbling into a pile of fine, gray dust. Silence descended on the valley, broken only by the whimpers of the injured and the horrified gasps of the survivors. Naruto stood, breathing heavily, staring at the dust that had once been a shinobi of Kumogakure. This changed everything. The silent zones weren't just creating victims. They were creating soldiers, an army that felt no pain, had no fear, and could not be stopped by conventional means. Karui came to his side, her sword held loosely in her hand, her face pale with shock. She had been ready to die fighting for a song, for an idea. But this was real. This was the enemy. What was that thing? She whispered. Naruto looked at her, his blue eyes hard as diamonds, the last trace of the Kfr. Rock star burned away by the cold reality of the fight. That was the silence, he said. And it's coming for everyone. Karui looked at the dust on the ground, then at Naruto's determined face. Her rebellion had just found its war. She gripped the hilt of her sword, her knuckles white. "Well," she said, her voice shaking but firm, a flash of her old fire returning. "It'll have to get through me first." Chapter 5 End. Chapter 6. Echoes of Silence. The land of iron was a nation of stoic silence. Its snow-dusted mountains and stark, gray fortresses were a monument to neutrality, a place where the clamor of the elemental nations was meant to die down into quiet, reasoned debate. Today, that silence was a heavy, suffocating blanket. Inside the main hall of the samurai fortress, the air was thick with accusation. A long, polished table dominated the room. At its head sat Mifune, the general of the land of iron, his weathered face a mask of impartial gravity. On one side sat the accusers. The fourth Raikage was a mountain of contained fury, his massive arms crossed over his chest, his mustache bristling with indignation. Beside him, Onoki, the third Tsuchikage, floated just above his chair. His ancient face pinched with a mixture of vindication and scorn. On the other side sat the defenders. Mai Terumi, the Mizukage, offered a strained, diplomatic smile that didn't reach her eyes. Gaara, the Kazekage, was a statue of calm, his presence the only unwavering point of support in the room. And at the far end of the table, in the seat reserved for the accused, sat Naruto. He wasn't dressed in his stage gear, but in a simple black shirt and pants. He wasn't a rock star today. He was a suspect. Behind him stood Kakashi and Shikamaru, their postures radiating a tense readiness. The facts are undeniable, the Raikage's voice boomed, shaking the dust from the high rafters. Konoha, Iwa, Hiri, Suna, and now, my own land. Wherever this musician goes, this silent plague follows. The Jonin my patrols found. The one he fought in the valley. He was part of the team investigating the initial reports from the border. He was exposed, turned into one of those things, and then drive on to Uzumaki's chakra, gathering like a moth to a flame. He is either the source of this contagion, or he is a magnet for it. Either way, he is the nexus of this crisis. Onoki chimed in, his reedy voice cutting through the air. His power is an unknown variable. A jutsu that manipulates the very spirit of thousands. It's reckless, uncontrolled. It is entirely possible that this silent zone phenomenon is nothing more than a catastrophic side effect of his performances. A dissonance created by his harmony. He is a weapon of mass disruption, and he doesn't even understand how he works. The accusation was laid bare. He was either a villain or a fool, a bio-weapon or a natural disaster. Mai Terumi cleared her throat. Raikage Dono, Tsuchikage Dono, with respect, your evidence is purely circumstantial. Naruto-kun has actively fought these threats when they have appeared. He fought a single hollow. The Raikage slammed his fist on the table, cracking the polished wood. After he lured it to a secret, a legal gathering that defied my direct orders. That is not the act of an ally. It is the act of an insurgent. The pressure in the room was immense. Naruto felt the weight of their fear, their suspicion. The old Naruto would have exploded, shouting about his honor, his dream, his ninja way. But he wasn't that boy anymore. The stage had taught him a different kind of power. The power of holding a crowd in the palm of your hand, of commanding attention not with volume, but with presence. He stood up slowly, every eye in the room locked onto him. You're right, he said, his voice calm, clear, and resonant. It carried to every corner of the hall without him having to raise it. The cage stared, stunned into silence by his agreement. You're right that I am the nexus, Naruto continued, his blue eyes moving from the Raikage to the Tsuchikage, meeting their hostile gazes without flinching. You're right that my power is an unknown variable. You're right that wherever I go, the silence seems to follow. You've laid out the facts perfectly. But you've read the story completely wrong. He placed his hands on the table, leaning forward slightly. He wasn't pleading. He was lecturing. You see me as a weapon. A tool. A problem to be managed. That's how you've always seen Jinchuriki. It's how you see anything you don't understand. You want to contain it, lock it down, study it, neutralize it. Your answer to every problem is to build a bigger cage. He straightened up, his voice gaining a hard, cutting edge. This enemy, the one that creates the silence, thinks the same way you do. They see emotion, connection, passion, everything my music represents, as a disease. A chaotic variable that must be controlled. Their silence is the ultimate cage. An entire world locked down, neutralized, managed. They aren't following me because I'm their source. They're hunting me. They're hunting my sound because it is the one thing, the only thing, that stands in opposition to their philosophy. He paused, letting his words sink in. The shinobi world is changing, he said, his voice softening, becoming a call to reason instead of a rebuke. The old hatreds, the old walls, they're starting to crumble. My music is just a part of that. It's a language that everyone can understand, a reminder that we are more than just our villages, more than just tools of war. This enemy, this is the old world's last dying scream. It is the philosophy of isolation and control, taken to its absolute extreme. It wants to drag us all back into the silent, lonely darkness. And you, by trying to lock me away, are helping them do it. The hall was utterly still. Naruto had taken their accusations and forged them into a mirror, forcing them to see their own reflection in the enemy they feared. The Raikage was speechless, his fury momentarily short-circuited by a logic he couldn't simply punch through. It was Onoki who recovered first, a cynical sneer on his face. A pretty speech, full of the Leaf's sentimental nonsense. But it is just that. A speech. You offer no proof, only pretty words. Is that so, Gramps? The doors to the hall swung open. Kuretsuchi stood there, clad in her Iowa flak jacket, her face set with a determination that was pure stone. She walked into the hall, ignoring the shocked gasps from the Iowa delegation, and stopped behind her grandfather's chair. You're out of line, granddaughter. Onoki hissed. No, Kuretsuchi said, her voice ringing with defiance. For the first time, I am standing exactly where I need to be. She slapped a thick scroll onto the table. This is the full, unredacted report from the Tsushigumo village. The version you tried to bury. It contains my patrol's testimony. They felt the silence. They felt that soul-crushing void. And it is the exact opposite of the energy they felt from Naruto's performance in Iwagakure. She looked at the other cage. My grandfather fears losing our will of stone. I fear we will become nothing but stones. Lifeless, silent, and forgotten. Naruto's music doesn't erode our will. It reminds us why we have it in the first place. Before the shock of her insubordination could settle, another voice cut through the air. She is correct. From a strategic perspective, Tamari stepped forward from the Suna delegation, her fan held loosely at her side. She exuded an aura of calm, lethal intelligence. I have analyzed the pattern of the attacks. Kinyuta Town, a hub of Konoha's textile trade, a symbol of its prosperity. Tsushigumo Village, Iwa's most productive mine, a source of its strength. Yosame Island, one of Kiri's key fishing centers, a symbol of its renewed life. The Spice Caravan, a sign of Suna's expanding trade. And the target in Kumo, a jonin from an elite investigative unit. These are not random. They are strategic strikes against morale, against the very symbols of a world that is healing. And who is the greatest symbol of that healing? Who is at the very center of this new, connected world? Her gaze fell on Naruto. This is not a plague. It is a targeted, ideological war. The enemy isn't just creating silent zones. They are clearing the board, removing key assets, preparing the battlefield. And their primary target is him. The Raikage and Onoki were reeling, their case being dismantled piece by piece, not by a Konoha shinobi, but by their own. It is still conjecture. Onoki spat. Words. Theories. We need proof. Then let me show you, a quiet voice said. Kakashi stepped aside, revealing Hinata Hyuga. She looked small and terribly fragile in the center of this room of giants. But her face held no fear. Only a quiet, unshakable resolve. She walked to the center of the room, her footsteps soft but sure. The Hyuga heiress. The Raikage grumbled. What is this? This, Kakashi said, his voice sharp, is your proof. 2 samurai guards opened a side door, wheeling in a single gurney. On it lay a man in simple robes. He was conscious, his eyes open, but they were vacant. Staring at nothing. He was a survivor from Kinyuta Town, kept in isolation by Konoha's intelligence division. Hinata-sama, Kakashi said softly. Hinata nodded. She formed a hand seal. And the veins around her temples bulged. Byakugan. Her pale lavender eyes transformed, gaining a sharp, piercing focus. First, she looked at Naruto. Describe what you see, Kakashi instructed. Hinata's voice was soft, but it carried the weight of absolute truth. I see Naruto-kun's chakra. It is a sun. It is a vortex of brilliant, golden energy, warm and chaotic, but it is alive. When he performs, this light extends outwards in threads, connecting to others. It doesn't replace their chakra. It harmonizes with it. It finds the discordant notes in a person's spirit and reminds them of their own song. It is a network of creation. It is life. She then turned her gaze to the catatonic man on the gurney. A sharp gasp escaped her lips, and she took an involuntary step back, her face paling. And this man? Kakashi prompted gently. Her voice trembled, laced with a horrified awe. It's the opposite. His chakra network is still there, but it is frozen. Crystalline, like shattered glass, and inside it, crawling through the cracks, is something else. It's not chakra, it's an anti-chakra. It's black, the color of a void. It doesn't flow. It consumes. It feeds on sound, on energy, on life. It is a parasitic silence. A cancer of the soul. She looked up, her piercing gaze sweeping across the faces of the cage. The energy inside this man is a perfect antithesis to Naruto-kun's power. One is a symphony. The other is a black hole. They cannot be from the same source. They are two sides of a fundamental war. The room was utterly, completely silent. Hinata's Byakugan, an unimpeachable dojutsu, had laid the truth bare for all to see. There were no more theories. No more conjecture. Only the horrifying, visual evidence of a war being waged on a spiritual plane they had never known existed. The Raikage sank back into his chair, the fury drained from him, replaced by a grim, dawning understanding. Onoki floated down, his feet touching the floor for the first time, a sign of profound shock. Naruto had won, but it was not a victory that brought joy. It was a confirmation of the terrible truth. Gaara was the first to speak, his voice cutting through the stunned silence. Then the course of action is clear. We have been trying to contain our greatest weapon, while the enemy has been actively hunting him. We must reverse this. We must unleash him. Mifune, who had remained silent throughout, finally spoke, his voice the sound of shifting gravel. The 5 great nations are in agreement, then. The threat is real, and Uzumaki Naruto is not its source, but its primary opponent. One by one, the cage nodded. First Mei, then Gaara. The Raikage gave a short, sharp, reluctant nod. Finally, Onoki, looking older and more tired than ever before, inclined his head. It is decided, Mifune declared. The 5 cage will form a joint task force to combat this threat. But our armies are useless against a spiritual plague. We need a specialized unit. A scalpel, not a sledgehammer. His gaze fell on Naruto, and then on the determined faces of Kuretsuchi, Temari, and Hinata. Uzumaki Naruto, the Raikage said, his voice no longer a boom of accusation, but a low rumble of command. I am officially sanctioning your group. You will have access to the intelligence and resources of all 5 great nations. Your mission is no longer a tour. It is a hunt. Find the source of this silence, and destroy it. The trial was over. The war had just been officially declared. Chapter 6 End. Chapter 7. The Fan Club Assemble. The land of iron in the aftermath of the summit was a different kind of quiet. The silence of accusation had been replaced by the hushed, urgent hum of an alliance scrambling to form. Naruto, however, wasn't in the grand meeting halls where John and Enders and strategists were drawing up plans that were already obsolete. He was in a small, private dojo, the air smelling of old wood and clean snow, a neutral ground provided by Mifune. The political machine was turning. But he knew it would be too slow, too clumsy. An army couldn't fight a shadow. A cage summit couldn't outmaneuver an enemy that operated on a spiritual level. He needed a different kind of team. He needed the ones who had stood for him when it counted. He had sent a single message to each of them. A time, a place, and a single, resonant musical note only they would recognize. Kuretsuchi was the first to arrive. She strode in not as a diplomat or a cage's granddaughter, but as a warrior, her Iowa flak jacket looking perfectly at home against the Spartan backdrop of the dojo. She gave a curt nod. Made some noise back there, didn't we? My grandfather hasn't been this angry since I replaced his favorite tea with mud water as a prank. This is better. Temari came next, moving with a quiet confidence. Her fan closed and held loosely in one hand. Her face was a mask of calm analysis, but her eyes held a new fire. The cage have formed a joint intelligence sharing pact. It's a logistical nightmare. By the time any useful intel gets through the proper channels and trickles down to a field team, the enemy will have created 3 more silent zones. Yuzuki simply appeared. One moment, the corner of the dojo was empty. The next, she was leaning against the wall, a shadow detaching itself from other shadows. Her Hunter Nin mask was off, her expression impassive, but our presence was a coiled spring of readiness. The loyalists in Kiri are being rooted out. The Mizukage is using this opportunity to clean house. It's created chaos. Good for covering one's tracks. Karui and Omoi were the last, practically bursting into the room. Karui's energy was a fire in the calm space, her red hair a vibrant slash of color. She was practically vibrating with a mixture of righteous fury and excitement. The Raikage is officially calling the Hollow a new type of forbidden jutsu puppet. He refuses to admit it was one of his own jonin. Typical. But he gave me an Omoia, SP. ECIAL assignment, to act as liaisons to your team. Basically, he's letting us go so we don't stir up more trouble at home. I've been assigned to observe and report, Omoi sighed, slumping against a wall. Which means if we all die, I'm expected to survive long enough to file the paperwork. It's a lot of pressure. What if my pen runs out of ink? Finally, Hinata entered, escorted by Kakashi. Shish. Ii looked a little overwhelmed to be in the presence of such forceful personalities, but she held her ground, her hands clasped in front of her, a quiet strength emanating from her. Naruto stood in the center of the room, looking at each of them. The stubborn rock of Iwa, the cutting wind of Suna, the silent water of Kiri, the blazing lightning of Kumo, and the seeing eyes of Konoha. They were the daughters of the 5 great nations, a collection of strengths and skills that no single village could hope to replicate. Thank you for coming, Naruto said, his voice quiet but firm, commanding their full attention. The Cage are building an army. We're going to build a scalpel. They can handle the big picture, the politics, the eventual cleanup. We're going to be the ones who actually hunt. No red tape, no jurisdictions, just us. He looked at Temari. Temari, you were right. This is a campaign. I need you to run it. I need you to be the strategist, to see the whole board. Where do we go? What's the enemy's next move? Temari's eyes lit up. This was her element. She stepped forward, unrolling a large map of the elemental nations on the dojo floor. The attacks are not random. They are escalating, moving from the outer borders inward. And they are targeting places of symbolic and logistical importance. The enemy isn't just spreading silence, they're blinding and deafening the nations before the real attack begins. Based on the current trajectory, the next likely targets will be major transportation or communication hubs. The central post route in the Land of Hot Water, or the GR. Eat Canyon Bridge that connects the Land of Fire to the north. Good, Naruto said, nodding. That's our target list. But we're not just reacting. We need to go on the offensive. We need to find their home base, their nest. He turned to the silent hunter Nin. Yuzuki, you got us through Kumo's patrols. I need you on intelligence. I need you to find whispers, rumors, anything that doesn't fit. This enemy is silent, but someone, somewhere, has seen something. A missing person, a strange traveler, a merchant who saw something on the road. Find their trail. Yuzuki gave a single, sharp nod. Silence leaves its own kind of trail. I can find it. Kuritsuchi, Naruto said, turning to the Iwa Kunoichi. You know logistics. You know how the world works, how to move gear and people without anyone noticing. I need you to be our tour manager. Get us what we need, where we need it. Secure safe houses, supply caches, everything the Cage Alliance is too slow to provide. Kuritsuchi grinned, a flash of sharp, white teeth. So I get to use my grandfather's black market contacts against his wishes. I was born for this job. Naruto then faced Karui. Karui, we've seen what these hollows can do. They're strong, they're fast, and they don't feel pain. We need a frontline. We need someone who can go toe-to-toe with them, someone who can break things. You are our thunder. You and Omoi will be our heavy hitters, our security. Finally, Karui cracked her knuckles, a wide, eager grin on her face. Someone who speaks my language. I might break a nail, Omoi lamented. Then it'll get infected, and I'll lose the whole finger. It'll throw off my sword balance forever. Lastly, Naruto's gaze fell on Hinata. Her role was less obvious but, he suspected, the most crucial of all. Hinata, you are our eyes. You're the only one who can see this enemy for what it really is. You're our compass, our early warning system. At the summit, you were amazing. You gave us the truth. We need you to keep doing that. When we get close to the enemy, you will be the one who can guide us through the darkness. Hinata looked up, meeting his gaze. For a moment, the shy girl was gone, replaced by the confident Hyuga heiress. I will not fail. Naruto looked around at the circle of powerful women he had assembled. This was not a harem. This was not a fan club. This was a war council. A team forged not by orders from a cage, but by a shared purpose, a shared belief in the sound he was trying to protect. "All right," he said, a new energy in his voice. "We have our roles, but we're not just a squad. On stage, I have a band. We need the same thing here. We need to be able to anticipate each other's moves, to harmonize, to know when to take the lead and when to provide the rhythm." He paused, a thought striking him. "And every band needs a name. How about Naruto's Angels?" Karui suggested, striking a pose. Omoi groaned. "Too derivative," Tamari said dismissively. "We are the counterpoint to the silence," Hinata said softly. "Surprising everyone. We are the sound. The anthem," Kuretsuchi added, a rare spark of poetry in her pragmatic soul. "We're his anthem." Naruto grinned. "I like it." He looked at the map spread on the floor. His world tour had become a war path. The crowds were gone, replaced by a silent, creeping enemy. But he wasn't alone anymore. He had his band. "Okay, team anthem," he said, his voice ringing with the same command he used on stage. "Let's go make some noise." Their first move was a masterpiece of coordinated chaos. Temari's analysis pointed to the Great Can. Yon Bridge is the most likely next target. It was a vital economic artery, and its destruction would cripple the northern territories for months. While the official Cage Alliance began slowly mobilizing a large shinobi contingent to reinforce the bridge's defenses, Tamari devised a faster, more elegant plan. Kuretsuchi, using a series of coded messages and a few well-placed bribes to Iowa merchant guilds, arranged for a geological survey team to be given priority access to the canyon. The team consisted of herself, Omoi, and Karui, posing as engineers. Their gear, hidden in drill bit casings and seismic sensors, was a full combat loadout. Meanwhile, Yuzuki, using her skills of infiltration, slipped into the nearest city to the bridge. She didn't look for soldiers or spies. She moved through the tea houses and noodle stands, the places where ordinary people talked. She listened for whispers of strangers on the road, of merchants who had taken a detour, of a hunter who had noticed a lack of animal life in a certain part of the forest. She was hunting for the subtle void the enemy left in its wake. Naruto and Hinata traveled separately, under the guise of Naruto returning to Konoha. They took a longer, more circuitous route that would bring them to the canyon from the south. It was during this journey that their partnership began to truly form. They traveled mostly at night, resting during the day. During one of these rests, in a small, hidden cave, Hinata was meditating, her Byakugan active, scanning their surroundings. "You're getting better at controlling your chakra signature," she noted, her eyes still closed. "It's less like a bonfire now. More like a forge. Hotter, but more contained." Naruto was sitting nearby, cleaning the strings of his guitar. "Practice," he said. "The fight with the hollow taught me something. Blasting it with sound didn't work. But flooding it with pure, focused life force did. It's not about volume. It's about resonance. Finding the right frequency." He looked at her. "What you did at the summit, that took guts, Hinata." "Thank you." Hinata blushed, opening her eyes. "I only told them what I saw. It is you who are brave. To stand against them all." "I'm not brave," he admitted with a wry smile. "I'm just stubborn. And I'm not used to people seeing what you see. Most people just hear the music. You see the notes. You see how it's made." There was a new intimacy between them, the shared understanding of the secret world his power unlocked. He was the source, but she was the only one who could truly read the language. A few hours later, a messenger hawk arrived, bearing a tiny scroll with a single, elegant brushstroke, Yuzuki's sigil. Naruto opened it. The message was brief. "Pilgrims, dressed in gray, don't eat, don't speak, moving toward the eastern anchor of the bridge. Animals avoid them. The trail." Naruto looked at Hinata. "Showtime." They arrived at the Great Canyon Bridge under the cover of twilight. The bridge was a breathtaking feat of engineering, a web of steel and wood spanning a chasm so deep its bottom was lost in shadow. Kuretsuchi, Karui, and Omoi were already in position, hidden amongst the rocks near the eastern anchor point, where the massive support cables were bolted into the mountainside. "Status." Naruto's voice came through the small, chakra-powered communicators Kuretsuchi had provided. "Got 5 of them." Karui's voice crackled back. Dressed like pilgrims, just like Yuzuki said. They're not using tools. They're just standing there, near the primary support pylons. It's creepy. Hinata stood beside Naruto on a high cliff overlooking the scene. She activated her Byakugan. There are more, she whispered. There are 12 of them. 7 are hidden inside the rock, phasing through it like ghosts. They're not attacking the bridge. They're infecting it. Through her eyes, she could see the black, parasitic anti-chakra seeping from the figures and into the very foundations of the bridge. They weren't going to blow it up. They were going to turn it into a massive silent zone, a dead structure that would collapse under its own lifeless weight, spreading the plague to anyone who tried to cross it. They're hollow formers, Naruto realized with a jolt of horror. They're the source. We can't let them complete the process. Temari's voice came over the comms from her remote command post miles away. This is it. First contact with the true enemy. Naruto, this is your stage. Karui, Kuretsuchi, you're his opening act. Go. Karui let out a yell of pure, unadulterated joy. Finally, she and Omoi burst from their cover. Karui was a red and black blur, her massive broadsword swinging in a devastating arc. Omoi was her opposite, a fluid, graceful dance of lightning-infused kenjutsu. They slammed into the 5 visible pilgrims. At the same time, Kuretsuchi stomped her foot on the ground. Earth-style. Bedrock coffin. The very mountain groaned. The rock around the 7 hidden pilgrims compressed inwards, trapping them, crushing them in a tomb of solid stone. It was a display of raw, overwhelming power. The 5 pilgrims in the open moved with the same unnatural speed as the hollow. But they were different. When Karui's sword clove one in half, it didn't bleed. It dissolved into 2 silent, screaming faces of shadow before evaporating. They're not human, Omoi yelled, narrowly dodging a silent lunge. They're made of that silent stuff. From his vantage point, Naruto saw it. This was the moment. He slung his guitar into position. Hinata, he said, can you pinpoint a weakness? A central point, a conductor. Hinata scanned the chaotic battlefield, her Byakugan pushed to its limit. She saw the black anti-chakra of the Shadow Pilgrims, the explosive lightning of Karui and Omoi. The solid earth of Kuretsuchi. They aren't individuals, she breathed. They're connected. Like a hive mind. The energy is flowing between them, but it originates from one. The one in the center. He's the amplifier. Got it, Naruto said. He took a deep breath. He didn't play a song of battle. He didn't play a lullaby. He played a single, perfect, resonant note. It was the note of life. The core frequency of his own chakra. He poured everything into it, not as a wave, but as a beam, a focused spear of pure, golden sound aimed directly at the central pilgrim Hinata had identified. The world seemed to hold its breath. The targeted pilgrim froze. The golden note of life slammed into its chest of pure void. It was not an explosion. It was a chemical reaction. A fundamental law of this new, terrible physics. Light met dark. Sound met silence. The pilgrim opened its mouth, and for the first time, one of them made a noise. It was a shriek of pure, undiluted static. A sound of reality tearing itself apart. Golden light erupted from its body, cracking its shadowy form like porcelain. The shriek was echoed by the other pilgrims as the feedback loop of Leaf. E-energy overloaded their silent network. One by one, they exploded, not into dust, but into silent, screaming echoes that faded into nothing. The battle was over in less than a minute. Silence returned to the canyon, but this time, it was a natural silence. The hum of the wind. The groaning of the bridge. The heavy breathing of the victors. Status report, Temari's voice commanded, cutting through the quiet. Threats eliminated. Kuretsuchi grunted, leaning against a rock. Some minor structural damage to the mountain, but the bridge is secure. My sword is covered in nothing, Omoi said, staring at his blade. How do you even clean nothing? What if it's contagious? My whole arm will probably fade away. Karui was laughing, a wild, breathless sound of adrenaline and victory. Did you see that? We kicked their silent asses. Up on the cliff, Naruto lowered his guitar, a deep exhaustion settling into his bones. He had won the battle, but Hinata, her Byakugan still active, was staring at the spot where the central pilgrim had vanished. Naruto, she said, her voice a horrified whisper. Before it disappeared, I saw something. Inside it, deep within the void, it wasn't empty. What did you see? He asked, a cold dread creeping over him. I saw a face, she said, her whole body trembling. A face I recognized. It was a shinobi from my clan. A member of the Hyuga branch family. He went missing on a mission 2 years ago. Chapter 7 End. Chapter 8. Sound versus silence. The victory at the Great Canyon Bridge felt like ash in their mouths. They regrouped in a hidden Iowa safe house that Kuretsuchi had secured. A bunker carved deep into a nameless mesa. The mood was grim, the elation of their flawless teamwork completely overshadowed by Hinata's final, horrifying revelation. Karui, usually a source of boundless, fiery energy, was silent, staring at the broadsword she had used to cleave the shadow pilgrims in two. Omoi chewed through an entire bag of lollipops, the frantic crunching the only sound in the room. So we're not just fighting monsters, Karui finally said, her voice rough. We're fighting our own, missing nin, people who were captured. Worse, Tamari corrected, her face a mask of cold fury. They are not just fighting with them. They are being used as the raw materials. A Hyuga, a clan prized for their eyes, their unique chakra. This isn't random. The enemy is harvesting specific shinobi. The implication was sickening. Every silent zone, every hollow, could be a person they once knew, a comrade, a friend, twisted into a weapon. Their mission had FTED from a hunt to a series of potential rescue operations, with a body count that was already too high. This changes the rules of engagement, Kuretsuchi stated, her pragmatism a hard anchor in the sea of emotion. We can't just go in, all fists and fury, if there's a chance to save the person inside. There was nothing left of him to save, Hinata said, her voice barely a whisper. She sat huddled in a corner. A blanket wrapped around her shoulders, though the chill she felt was not from the cold stone. I saw his face, but it was like a photograph trapped in amber. A memory. The rest of I.M., the thing wearing his memory, was pure void. I don't think they can be saved. The moral dilemma hung heavy in the air. Could they risk their lives, their mission, on the faint hope of saving a soul that was likely already gone? It was Yuzuki, polishing her kodachi with methodical precision, who broke the impasse. Emotion is a luxury we can't afford. It is a poison in the field. We have a new lead. A powerful one. All eyes turned to her. The enemy isn't just taking random shinobi, Yuzuki continued, her voice flat and analytical. They are collecting bloodlines. The Hyuga is proof. If you want to study, dissect, and weaponize a wide variety of jutsu and genetic traits, there is only one place in the history of the elemental nations that was ever built for that exact purpose. A collective, dawning horror passed through the room as they all arrived at the same conclusion. Orochimaru's laboratories, Shikamaru's voice, patched in via a long-range communicator, confirmed from Konoha. We've been cross-referencing high-profile disappearances with the locations of his known bases. Most were destroyed, but the central hub, the one that was never found by the Alliance, was Otogakure. The village hidden in sound. The irony was so thick it was suffocating. The place built to weaponize sound was now the heart of the absolute silence. It makes a sick kind of sense, Naruto said, his fists clenched. He had been quiet until now, absorbing the weight of this new reality. The enemy is using his research, his methods. Tamari was already at the map. Otogakure is in the land of sound, a collection of dozens of small, hidden bases, not a single village. It's a labyrinth. We could spend years searching for the right one. We don't have to, Yuzuki said. She laid a smaller, more detailed map on the table. A map no one in the Shinobi Alliance was supposed to have. Kiri's hunter nin have their own intelligence. We tracked one of Orochimaru's top researchers there years ago. We never engaged. The place was wrong. Our sensors reported a dead zone. We thought it was a powerful barrier ninjutsu. Now, I suspect it was the first silent zone, the epicenter. She pointed to a spot deep within a range of jagged, barren mountains. This is where we go. This is the source. The journey to the land of sound was a grim, silent affair. They moved fast, using a network of Kuro, Tsuchi's smuggler's routes and Yuzuki's stealth techniques. There was no banter, no camaraderie. Just the cold, shared purpose of a team heading into the heart of enemy territory. The moment they crossed the border, they felt it. The very air grew thin, not physically, but spiritually. The natural hum of life, the insects, the wind, the faint chakra of the earth itself, was gone. It was replaced by a profound and unnatural stillness. A pressure on the eardrums and a cold weight on the soul. "We're here," Hinata whispered, her Byakugan already active. "The entire valley. It's a silent zone. An old one. It's settled. Like a frozen lake." The ruins of Otogakure were not ruins in the traditional sense. There was no rubble, no signs of battle. The stark, angular buildings were perfectly preserved, just empty. Lifeless. Gray dust coated everything, the remains of whatever life had once been here, crumbled to nothing by the oppressive silence. It was a city-sized tomb. Split up. 2-person cells, Tamari commanded over the comms. Her voice a clipped whisper. "Kuritsuchi, Karui, Omoi, your heavy assault, take the west sector. Yuzuki and I will take the east. Naruto, Hinata, you're the core. Head for the central spire. That's the most likely location for a primary lab. Maintain radio silence unless you make contact. Go." Naruto and Hinata moved through the silent streets like ghosts. The feeling was deeply unsettling. Naruto could feel his own chakra being suppressed, the vibrant energy within him dampened by the all-consuming quiet. "It feels like it's trying to get inside," he muttered, shaking his head to clear it. "It is," Hinata confirmed, her eyes scanning their surroundings. "It's pulling at the edges of my chakra, trying to find a way in. It's hungry." They found the entrance to the central spire. A heavy steel door that had been fused shut. Naruto placed a hand on it, and instead of trying to force it, he sent a single, sharp pulse of sonic chakra into the lock mechanism, shattering the tumblers from the inside. The door swung open with a groan that sounded blasphemously loud in the dead air. Inside was a labyrinth of sterile white corridors, a place of cold science and dark secrets. The silence was even deeper here, seeming to cling to the very walls. As they rounded a corner, they saw them. Hollows. At least a dozen of them, former Otogakure shinobi, standing perfectly still. Their empty eyes fixed on the corridor. They were guards, frozen in place, waiting for a trigger. The moment Naruto and Hinata's living chakra entered their sensory range, they moved. The fight was swift and brutal. Naruto didn't use his guitar. Sound was a liability here, its power muted. This was close-quarters combat. He moved like a dancer, a whirlwind of kicks and punches, his Rasengan a silent, grinding vortex of power that disintegrated the hollows it touched. Beside him, Hinata was a blur of motion, her gentle fist strikes finding the dormant tenketsu points of the hollows, not to block their chakra, but to cause a catastrophic overload in their frozen networks, making them shatter like glass. They cleared the corridor and moved deeper, finally finding what they were looking for, a massive, circular laboratory. The site was a gallery of horrors. Stasis tubes lined the walls, each containing a shinobi, their faces peaceful, as if asleep. Naruto recognized a few from their bingo books, a famous swordsman from Kiri, a taijutsu master from Kumo, a genjutsu prodigy from Konoha. All missing, all presumed dead. They were Orochimaru's collection, now repurposed. In the center of the room was a large, obsidian throne-like chair connected by thick cables to a device that looked like a perversion of one of Naruto's own amplifiers. A map on a nearby console showed the silent zones as spreading black stains across the elemental nations. And on a steel table, a single, leather-bound journal. Naruto picked it up. The handwriting was elegant, precise, and utterly insane. Day 47. The Hyuga's genetic structure is ideal. Its all-seeing eye provides the perfect vessel for focusing the void. The soul is fragile, but the chakra network is a robust framework. Once the former is scooped out, the latter becomes a perfect cage for a shard of the divine silence. Day 98. Orochimaru's amplification theories were crude, but effective. He sought to conquer life with life. A foolish paradox. True peace, true order, can only be achieved by the absolute negation of the variables. Emotion, will, individuality. These are the sources of all conflict. My divine silence is the cure. A perfect, harmonious, empty peace. Day 157. The Uzumaki boy is a fascinating anomaly. He is the antithesis, a nexus of the very chaos I seek to erase. He does not create order, he harmonizes chaos. A fundamentally flawed approach. He must be unmade. His sound must be consumed. His song will be my final overture before the great work begins. The journal was signed with a single name, Ototari. Otsutsuki. Hinata breathed, staring at the name, her blood running cold. The legends of her clan spoke of a branch of the celestial beings who were not interested in power, but in a state of perfect, deathly order. Suddenly, a slow, mocking clap echoed from the far side of the laboratory. A figure detached itself from the shadows. He was tall and impossibly thin, dressed in a gray Odogaker robe. His face pale and featureless, except for a wide, stitched-on smile. "Bravo," the figure said, his voice a perfect mimicry of Naruto's own. "You've discovered the artist's private study. But I'm afraid the show is over." "Who are you?" Naruto demanded, stepping in front of Hinata. "I am Kyo," the figure replied, his voice shifting, now a perfect echo of Hinata's. "The echo. I am the master's first perfect creation. I am the silence that listens." He raised a hand, and a wave of pure, concussive sound, an exact replica of Naruto's string shot, erupted from his palm, forcing Naruto and Hinata to dive for cover. "My own trick," Naruto growled, pulling out his guitar. "Let's see how you like the real thing." He struck a powerful, driving chord, sending a massive wave of golden energy at Kyo. Kyo simply stood there, his stitched smile unwavering. He opened his mouth, and a vortex of swirling silence seemed to form, inhaling Naruto's attack. The golden wave vanished into his mouth without a trace. "Delicious," Kyo said, his voice now a chorus of the rest of Team Anthem, perfectly replicated from their calm chatter. A chaotic vintage, full of tiresome hope. He then opened his mouth again, and Naruto's own power cord, perfectly preserved, blasted back out, slamming into Naruto and sending him flying into a console, which exploded in a shower of sparks. "Naruto-kun," Hinata cried. "It doesn't work." Naruto coughed, struggling to his feet. "He absorbs it. He turns it back on me." This was a nightmare. His greatest weapon was not only useless, but it was now the enemy's ammunition. The doors to the lab burst open. Karui, Kuretsuchi, and the others stormed in, drawn by the sound of the explosion. "Looks like the party started without us," Karui yelled, charging forward, her broadsword raised. Kyo simply tilted his head. He let out a low hum, which rapidly escalated in pitch until it perfectly matched the resonant frequency of Karui's chakra-infused steel. Her blade began to vibrate violently. Before she could strike, it shattered into 1,000 pieces with a high-pitched scream. "My sword," she gasped, stunned. "A simple matter of harmony," Kyo chirped. This enemy was not a brute. It was a technician. A perfect counter. "Forget sound. Just crush him," Kuretsuchi roared, slamming her hands on the floor. Earth style. Mobile core. The entire section of the floor beneath Kyo rose up, intending to trap him against the ceiling. But Kyo simply stomped his foot, releasing a low, powerful frequency that traveled through the rock, finding a natural Alt line and causing Kuretsuchi's jutsu to crumble into a pile of rubble before it could reach him. He was dismantling them, one by one, using their own powers against them. "We can't beat him like this," Tamari shouted, conjuring a gale of wind to keep him off balance. "He analyzes and counters everything." It was Hinata, her Byakugan blazing, who saw it. "He has to be silent to listen." When he absorbed Naruto's attack, his own chakra network went completely still for a fraction of a second. That's his weakness. He can't listen and speak at the same time. Naruto's eyes flashed with understanding. It was a desperate, insane plan. "Everyone, give me everything you've got," he yelled. "Aim for me." "What?" Karui screamed. "Just do it. Trust me." He stood his ground, guitar at the ready. Kuretsuchi, Tamari, Karui, Omoi. They hesitated for a fraction of a second, then nodded. They unleashed a combined barrage of their signature attacks, a gale of cutting wind, a volley of massive boulders. A storm of lightning-fast sword strikes, all aimed not at Kyo, but at Naruto. Kyo's stitched smile widened. A group suicide. How droll. He opened his mouth, preparing to absorb the massive wave of incoming power. But at the last possible second, Naruto didn't absorb the attacks. He didn't block them. He played a single, dissonant, ugly chord on his guitar, a sound designed not to attack, but to redirect. He used the sound wave to bend the path of his friend's attacks, weaving them together into a single, chaotic, overwhelming maelstrom of elemental fury that curved around him and slammed in to Kyo while his silent absorption vortex was still open. Kyo's eyes widened for the first time. He had prepared to listen to one song, but had been hit by an entire orchestra playing at once. He couldn't process it. The chaotic energy overloaded him. He staggered back, cracks of golden light, Naruto's residual energy from the first attack, appearing all over his body. I am impossible. Such noise. His form began to dissolve, crumbling like the hollows. But before he vanished completely, he looked at Naruto, his voice now a faint, terrified whisper. The master, he doesn't need this place anymore. The final instrument is ready. He will play his anthem from the moon, and the whole world will finally be quiet. The last piece of him dissolved into nothing. As his last word faded, a high-pitched alarm began to blare through the facility. Red lights flashed. Self-destruct sequence initiated. A cold, mechanical voice announced. We have to go. Now. Tamari commanded. They fled the lab, racking through the collapsing corridors as explosions rocked the entire spire. They burst out into the dead, silent valley just as the entire mountain behind them imploded, swallowing the laboratory and all its horrors into the earth. They stood, bruised, battered, and breathing heavily, staring at the tomb of their enemy's secrets. They had the name, they had the philosophy, and now, they had the terrifying endgame. The Moon. Chapter 8 End. Chapter 9. The Anthem of the World. The silence after the lab's destruction was heavier than any they had yet encountered. It was the silence of a question answered with a world-ending threat. The moon. The words echoed in their minds, a final, chilling prophecy from a dead man's voice. Back in the land of iron, the emergency cage summit reconvened. This time, there was no debate, no suspicion. There was only the cold, shared terror of a foe whose ambition was literally astronomical. The moon, Onoki repeated, his voice thin, the weight of his years pressing down on him. The legends speak of the Otsutsuki's power there. A place of sealing, of creation. If this Ototari has found a way to use it as an amplifier, he could project his divine silence across the entire planet in an instant. Shikamaru finished, his face pale, the strategic implications staggering. There would be nowhere to run. No valley to hide in. The entire world would become a single, permanent silent zone. The Raikage slammed a fist onto the new, reinforced table. Then we stop him before he gets there. Kumo's sensor core will monitor all chakra ascensions. I was Deuce. Chila's bewildering cover will obscure the sky. We will form a perimeter around the planet itself. It is a noble, but futile gesture. Raikage Dono. Temari's voice was sharp, cutting through the bravado. Her fan was spread on the table. Not as a weapon, but as a map of their impending doom. We are shinobi, not gods. Our jutsu are earthbound. He is an Otsutsuki. His methods of travel will be beyond our detection until it is too late. We cannot form a shield around the world. Our only option is a spear. All eyes in the room turned to Naruto. He stood before the cage, no longer a suspect or a rock star, but a soldier receiving his final orders. He was not alone. Behind him, his band, his team, stood in a silent line of unwavering solidarity. Gaara's voice was the calm in the storm. Kuretsuchi-san, in your report, you mentioned your grandfather's less than official research. Kuretsuchi stepped forward, a defiant glint in her eye as she met her grandfather's furious glare. During the last war, the Tsuchikage commissioned a project. Project Tsukuyomi, a contingency plan to reach the moon in the event of a global catastrophe that made the surface uninhabitable. It was deemed too expensive, too dangerous. It was a series of high-propulsion, chakra-fueled rocket scrolls. It was a mad fantasy. Onoki snapped. It's our only chance, Naruto said, his voice ringing with absolute certainty. We have to get up there. We have to take the fight to him. The plan was suicide, a desperate, last-ditch gamble on a forgotten piece of theoretical ninjutsu. But it was the only plan they had. A frantic, global effort began. While the Shinobi Alliance mobilized, preparing for the inevitable chaos on the ground, a small, elite team of Iowa engineers, dragged out of retirement and sworn to secrecy. Worked around the clock in a hidden forge. Kuretsuchi was in her element, barking orders, translating ancient, half-finished schematics, her will of stone, focused on forging their miracle. In Konoha, Naruto met with the great toad sage, Fukasaku, in the smoky clearing of Mount Myoboku. A battle on the moon, you say? The old toad croaked. Unprecedented. The air is thin. The sage chakra is different there. Unstable. It will be a dangerous place for you to fight. I don't have a choice, Naruto said simply. No, you do not, Fukasaku agreed. He pointed a webbed finger at Naruto. Your strength comes from your connection to the world, boy. To the life around you. On that barren rock, you will be cut off. Alone. He won't be alone, a voice said. Hinata stood at the edge of the clearing. She had followed him. I am going with him. Fukasaku squinted at her. The Hyuga girl. Your eyes can see the flow of chakra. But can they see the flow of hope? They can see him, Hinata replied. Her voice filled with a strength that surprised even Naruto. And as long as I can see him, he will not be cut off. I will be his connection. I will be his eyes. The plan solidified. It was a multi-stage mission. A jutsu on an unprecedented scale. Kuretsuchi and her engineers finished the prototype. A large, cylindrical capsule, barely big enough for 7 people, covered from top to bottom in explosive propulsion scrolls and stabilizer seals. It was less of a spacecraft and more of a cannonball aimed at the heavens. It would get them most of the way there, into the upper atmosphere. From there, Gamabunta, summoned into the thin air, would use his immense strength to give them a final, titanic push, a toad-style rocket jump into the void. The final leg of the journey would fall to Naruto. He would have to encase the capsule and the Toad Chief in a cocoon of his Nine Tails chakra, a makeshift atmosphere to protect them from the vacuum of space. It would drain him immensely. Long before the real fight even began. The day of the launch, the mood was electric with a mixture of terror and hope. The entire Shinobi Alliance was now engaged in a desperate holding action across the globe. As if on cue, a wave of hollows, far more numerous and organized than before, had launched simultaneous attacks on all 5 great villages. It was a planetary diversion. Odo Tari was clearing the stage for his final performance. Inside the cramped Iowa capsule, the team was a picture of tense readiness. Kuretsuchi was at the control panel, her face beaded with sweat. Karui and Omoi were strapped into crash seats. Their bravado replaced by a grim silence. Tamari was monitoring global communications, her face a mask of concentration as reports of the battles below flooded in. Yuzuki was a statue, her senses extending outwards, feeling for any unseen threats. And Hinata sat beside Naruto, her hand resting near his, a silent promise. All systems are, probably, stable, Kuretsuchi announced, her voice tight. Propulsion scrolls are hot. Ignition in 3, 2, 1. The world became fire and noise. A force like a mountain slamming into them pressed them deep into their seats. The capsule shrieked as it tore through the atmosphere, a man-made meteor in reverse. Through the tiny viewport, they saw the world fall away, the blue sky darkening to an impossible indigo, then to the star-dusted black of space. The rocket scrolls burned out. For a moment, they were adrift in a terrifying silence, tumbling end over end. Now, Chief, Naruto yelled, with a titanic poof of smoke. That instantly dissipated into the void. Gamabunta appeared, his massive form surrounding the capsule. He bent his powerful legs, and with a grunt that had no air to travel through but that they felt in their very bones, he pushed. The capsule shot forward, a bullet aimed at the pale, pockmarked face of the moon. My turn, Naruto yelled, closing his eyes. Golden chakra, brilliant and fierce, erupted from him, flowing out of the capsule and enveloping them and the giant toad in a blazing, life-sustaining aura. The drain was immense, a physical torment, but he held it, his will an iron barrier against the killing void. As they drew closer, they saw it. On the surface of the moon, in the center of a vast, dark mare, a structure was growing. It was a twisted, crystalline spire, black as pitch, that seemed to be drinking the very starlight. It pulsed with a sickening, silent rhythm. At its apex stood a single, white-haired figure, Odo Tari. He was waiting for them. This is as far as I go, Naruto. Gamabunta's voice boomed telepathically. With a final, sorrowful look, he vanished in a puff of smoke, returning to the safety of Mount Myoboku. The chakra cocoon began to flicker. "We're losing stability," Kuritsuchi shouted. "We're going in too hot. Brace for impact," Naruto roared, pouring the last of his reserves into cushioning their landing. The capsule slammed into the lunar surface, a violent, grinding crash that tore the metal shell apart, scattering the team across the gray, dusty plain. They pushed themselves from the wreckage, their movements clumsy in the low gravity. They were alive, bruised, battered, but alive. They stood on the surface of the moon, the silent, beautiful, terrifying curve of their world hanging in the black sky above them. And before them, the black spire pulsed. The final instrument of a mad god. Ototari floated down from his perch to meet them. He was tall and regal, clad in the white, flowing robes of the Otsutsuki main family. His eyes were a pure, depthless black, and his face was a serene, beautiful mask of absolute conviction. There was no malice in his expression, only a profound, sorrowful pity. "You have come so far," his voice echoed not in the air, but directly in their minds, a telepathic intrusion that was as cold and sterile as his philosophy. "You have made so much noise, only to die in the most perfect silence imaginable. Your silence is a lie." "Ototari," Naruto said, stepping forward, his team fanning out behind him. The last of his chakra cloak evaporated, and he stood exposed on the lunar surface, his voice a thought projected by pure will. "It's not peace. It's an empty cage." "A cage? No," Ototari corrected gently. "It is a release. I will free your world from the disease of emotion, from the chaos of individuality, from the pain of hope. I am not your enemy. I am your savior." He raised a hand, and from the ground around him, figures began to rise. They were an army of hollows, but they were different from the ones on Earth. These were his honor guard, crafted from the most powerful shinobi he had collected. There, in the front rank, was the unmistakable form of a Kumo Jonin with two powerful swords, Karui's former sensei. Next to him, a Suna puppet master whose movements were a perfect, chilling echo of Konkuro's. "Your friends are waiting for you," Ototari said. "They are so much happier now. So quiet." Karui let out a roar of pure, undiluted rage, a sound that died instantly in the vacuum but was felt by everyone as a flare of raw, homicidal chakra. She launched herself forward, a red comet of fury in the low gravity. Her fists crackling with lightning. The final battle had begun. On a silent, alien world, under the watchful eye of the home they had left behind, the anthem of the world prepared to play its final, desperate encore against a god who wanted to silence the universe. Chapter 9 End.